And we're live.
Before I go.
So pumped. We have our first episode with Zach Marlow. What's up, Zach?
Yeah, it's so good to be here. Oh my
Love you,
goodness.
brother.
I'm here with
So
Frank
pumped.
Yang. I'm here with
And we're back with Frank Yang. Yes.
I'm doing this thing that I do a lot now, which is talk to strangers on the internet publicly.
I never do that. I do sometimes now. I used to never do that. I used to have this fear of webcams. I used to be afraid of talking to people about webcam because I'm afraid if I forget to turn it off, and then when I masturbate to porn, people will see it, and then it'll be like millions of eyes of people that be on webcams with me just peeking through the little keyhole.
Frank, remember, we're trying to make this episode relatable for people with compassion and collective awakening.
Yeah, family friendly. We're trying to connect
think
with
that
the
was-
broadest swath of humanity possible. We've got to facilitate this awakening because it doesn't matter if you got it figured out or I've got it figured out or Atlas has it figured out. We've all got to get it figured out or it doesn't mean anything. Ain't shit.
Because of compassion after realization that I'm not scared of webcam anymore. So that's all related. Yeah. After realization, I'm not scared of webcams anymore. I talk to strangers now on webcams.
Are you scared? Do you feel any fear?
Before, wow, I was fearful of webcams, but now I'm not. That's it.
Yeah, I don't really feel fear anymore. I maybe I do. I mean, I notice when other people around me are afraid of things. They don't generally bother me.
I'll go ahead and just say that just on a very simple way for people that are watching, what we mean in a very general sense by awakening is sort of realizing the unity of all existence. And so realizing our oneness and realizing the love for each other, because we are that same universe, sort of exploring. And then now what we do as we sort of realize that is now we figure out how can we weave that into the mainstream society that doesn't necessarily feel oneness and doesn't necessarily feel harmony, and they maybe feel a little bit, very stressed out or very depressed or very anxious, or they feel like they're locked up in their 9-to-5 job that they can't escape. And so how can we bring love and compassion and unity into this is what is going to be one of the big themes that we talk about on the show, into the mainstream.
Well, I was thinking about it on the way over here on the train, and well, first of all, the train stopped on the tracks, and I could see everybody around me was very impatient and was antsy and was afraid or was angry or was, like a friend of mine was with me, and he was like, "Oh, when is the train going to come? When is the train going to come?" And I was just like, "You got to chill. You got to just relax because time is a subjective thing. It doesn't really exist in a linear way." And if you stare into each moment and you're like, okay, how much longer? How much longer? How much longer? It's literally going to expand. It's going to be longer than it otherwise would be if you just take that time and forget it or do something else. So it's like if you're stuck in traffic, keeping these practical, keeping this tethered to the moment. I mean, because these are the million moments of fear and anxiety and dread, not just the moment where the sword is at your throat and you're like, okay, now I need to be cool and calm and collected. It's like these many, many, many moments through the day that it's like we're stuck in traffic and you're like, okay, I'm delayed, or you have a layover at the airport. And it's like, okay, I have to kill an hour. You can spend that hour agonizing over how late you are or how this is going to increase the stress in your life, or you can accept, oh, okay, I have an hour. What I choose to do with this time, I can take a breath, disconnect from this moment, disconnect from this fear, this reaction, and, find some peace, find a center, or do whatever I want, or just enjoy myself. And I could never do that as a kid. I could never do that for most of my life. I couldn't just be. And I think that's a core problem that we experience today, that so many people through COVID-19, just their life went on hold and they were stuck in a room for, 6 months or a year. And that was like the end of the world. That was the most traumatic thing that they've ever experienced. When, if you just know how to be with your thoughts, I mean, it can be a real blessing just to not have to, run around in this wheel or treadmill. Some of us here like the treadmill, though.
Wait, I was gonna mention treadmills.
What about them?
When I was younger, I used to just sprint on the treadmill to try to be the fastest man in the world. I thought I was the fastest man in the world because I could turn the treadmill all the way up, and I'll sprint to watch. I'll watch TVs of sprinters sprint, and I'll try to master their the speed of their the cycling of their legs. But then I realized speed is actually the result of the length and the speed, not just the speed. So I was doing like this, but when I should be like this, and I realized I couldn't be a sprinter. Then I started to meditate.
I think there's a couple more steps in the Frank Yang story there, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I love the relatability of the example that Marlow just gave, because everyone basically has moments in every day of their life where they can tell the difference between where they have an opportunity to like take a breath and sort of regain some of their sovereignty and will and choice around their happiness, and to not suffer, to not be anxious, to not be depressed. And that those were great examples. You're on the train is delayed anyway. You may as well not perpetually focus yourself on the delayed train and suffer and be anxious, but instead liberate yourself from that, be more free, and then enjoy the nature, the clouds, or if you want to read an email and get through something or whatever you're doing, but not be ruminating on that specific thing.
well, it's like as every single second of our lives have been atomized and chopped up into these like increasingly small little moments, that each one of those moments, each second of our lives, as if we embody stress and pain and misery and suffering, becomes a prison. And it's prison to prison to prison to prison to prison. So I looked up as I had that exchange with my friend, and I see a girl on the train and she's reading A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, and I was like, she gets it.
That's a really important point, is don't make your life prison to prison to prison. Like, increase your amount of possibilities, increase your choice architecture as much as possible every single moment. So you're not just locked into just one excessive anxious rumination, so that there's more possibilities for you.
Yeah, even when you go into the matrix or go into the prison, you still be perceived as infinite, because nirvana is samsara. It's the
the non-dual closing the loop right there. Thanks, bro. Yeah. For the person on the train, even though I'm anxious and suffering, this is still non-dual. This is still infinite.
Yeah. It's a little bit too soon to tell them that.
Someone
But it's true though. I think talking about
somebody said a quote to me the other day that was like,
I missed the joke. I missed the punchline.
the matrix of reality is the punchline. I think the whole thing is, it's very funny. It's really very funny and strange.
Cosmic joke.
You gotta zip out of yourself and look at that. We're like these meat creatures trapped in this crazy world of minutes and moments and trains that, you know, it's just very weird, and none of it makes sense until like a panda sitting on a tree. They're just like, what the fuck are you doing? Chill out. But on the subject of like explaining, you know, the non-dual to the stressed person on the subway, I heard a great quote the other day. It was like, explaining philosophy to somebody with it's cruel to explain philosophy to someone who has an empty stomach. So it's like a lot of people, and
It's
I think
a cool quote. Yeah,
kind of brings me into like the central point of what I've wanted to talk about for a while, and you know, this episode coming up really fits perfectly for me, because it burns in me, and I see spiritual people, I see people who are enlightened. You know, I even had this conversation with a friend recently about like Eckhart Tolle, like, oh, he doesn't get it, blah 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 blah, where it's like talking about philosophy and awakening and all of these things to the vast majority of people in our world is an insult, and it's aloof, and it will never be understandable to them from the framework that they're operating from, because society is designed intentionally, you know, latticed to keep people from being able to work their way up that sort of ladder of just basically meeting their basic needs. And this has been studied from the sociological perspective and from the physiological, you know, neurological, psychological, every perspective. People are trapped in a wheel, a hamster wheel, not a treadmill on their own choice, but a wheel of labor and servitude, and they're working 60 hours a week. I talked to an Uber driver the other day. He worked 100 hours a week, and it's like, you can't, if you're so focused on meeting your next meal or putting food on the table or feeding your children or any of these things that are just pure survival. If you're in survival mode, you can't even delay gratification to think about, anything beyond eating a candy bar right now. It's physically impossible. So it's like,
it's more difficult to have metacognition when your basic needs aren't being met.
But in a way, it's easier because suffering brings out awakening as well. So but you have to have the knowledge of it.
Well, there's a huge difference between starvation and fasting.
Yeah.
Somebody who is in the desert, who's like, I'm going to deprive myself of these nutrients to induce a state, that person is doing it intentionally, Whereas who just has no food in their stomach and that's all they can think about, they're not going to switch from, hunger into enlightenment. It's just not going to happen.
I would say
miracle.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like they can, because I think suffering drives most people's progress to awakening. And also, like under really stressful situations is where a lot of people have glimpses of non-duality. But there's definitely a range to this thing, like that doesn't happen. And it's not like you suffer and then you become awakened. It's not like that. But just having the acknowledge of it. Let's just say, like, just for a person who like suffers quite a lot, he has to go from his 9-to-5 job every day. But then he read a Katoli or something like that. He had an idea of awakening, that you can watch your thoughts, you can witness your thoughts. He has an idea imprinted in his mind, like incepted in his mind, and then he can, if he can apply that in everyday stressful situations, it's actually a really good workout. It's kind of like construction workers that just get buff.
But yeah, I mean, every single moment of our lives, it can be a yoga. It can be practice. And I think for me, honestly, I don't really meditate. I should. I'm slacking on my metacognition, but I feel like my practice, my path is very external. It's about, kind of, instead of looking inward, it's looking outward and seeing that self in everything, that's seeing that every person on the train, that is you, and what they're going through is what you're going through on, the deepest level, that we're all sort of enmeshed in Indra's net, or, we're all just connected on this in the simplest way. We're all in it together. And so I feel those people's struggles and I learn from them. And I think I have myself learned and grown through extreme suffering, but not everyday suffering. Everyday suffering is confusing and baffling. It's like when something horrible happens, when a meteor crashes into your barn and kills your whole family, you actually stop and ask, why? But if it's suffering on suffering on suffering, endless moments stacked on moments, like needles, like 1,000 needles into you every single moment of your life, you don't really have the time or the energy or the space between that to really stop and question what the hell is going on. Why? People just react. So we're mostly stuck in this reactive cycle, this reactive dualism. We go from this to this, from this to this, to this to this, with no latency, with nothing in between. And there are moments of grace, but I think that grace it can come in a freak moment. It can come in a reverberation through the floor into your pineal gland, or, just something breaking in your chakras, or, a Kundalini awakening or something like that. But it often doesn't. And it's really tragic to me, being a person that experiences great freedom, to see people suffer when they don't need to, because just the joy of, Alice and I were talking about this on our in a little introductory phone call. We've only talked, once or twice. We've been sending each other voice messages too. We're talking about the joy of being, the joy of living purposefully, the joy of the like transcendent, beautiful, wonderful joy of just standing in your purpose, of literally just being, just laughing and smiling because you exist. And I just think about all those moments that I spent, one, wasting away, suffering about things that don't really matter or that will go away in a minute, being impatient, needing a Game Boy to get through a beautiful drive through the mountains, whatever. But it's like, or like drinking myself into oblivion, or like seeking Frank knows about that, or like, trying to bang hot people, or, be successful or competitive or win or do any of these things that are really ultimately just fleshy pleasures that are gone in a minute, that make you feel even worse after they're gone, because you're like, oh, now I need another and another and another. Whereas just finding that sense of purpose of like, I'm in my true self, and I'm finding that self in other people, and I'm spreading it. That's the great joy, is like to be it but even greater is to share it.
This is something I wanted to say. Oh, okay. So with talking about compassion, we have to first define compassion and how it's different from empathy, because in my experience, true compassion is what Osho calls a cold love. So basically, you can't really truly be compassionate unless you completely empty out the self. And that's why awakening and compassion go hand in hand. And the action, whatever action that you take before awakening is selfish, regardless. And also in this cold love of compassion, it's not filtered through the individual body, mind's emotion. So that's why it's difference between that and empathy. In true compassion, without the separate self, when other people suffer, you actually don't feel anything. But that also frees up more space to help them, because when you see, the universe doesn't want more suffering. If you feel the suffering that other people are feeling, you're actually creating more suffering. So that's the difference between compassion from the space of the non-separate self versus empathy from the space of the separate self. If you feel emotion when other people also feel that emotion, that gets in the way of you purely helping them out of the universal well of consciousness. So I would say that there's waking up. The reacting part.
But I think for me, I don't know. That's kind of where I live. That's where I sit most comfortably, is in that discomfortable space or uncomfortable space of, experiencing the discomfort, knowing that insights are there, that lessons are there, that's where meaning lies. And I really seek it out. It's kind of a sick thing that, like, to seek suffering in a way, to seek Terence McKenna defined a shamanism as like philosophy through extreme experience, through seeking out extreme experiences that will really show you like the poles of duality, that will show you all the way to the end, to the point where you've gone so far in one direction, you really see that it's all a circle and you go back into the other.
That's what I was talking about earlier too, about how, like, suffering creates some kind of awakening, like it's a catalyst for awakening. Yeah. Same point as
Frank, how do you feel like your suffering really was the lubricant or the fuel that pushed you towards the extreme experiences? I mean, and you're a connoisseur of extreme experiences, a true shaman in that. How do you feel like suffering more than any of those other things? That's just like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna eat 1,000 calories, or I'm gonna lift 500 pounds, or
I think suffering was never really the catalyst for me, even though it is subconsciously maybe. But I never wanted to eradicate suffering. I just wanted to, like, fuck myself. I just wanted the universe to fuck me without a condom. I wanted to have an orgy with the universe, and that's why I kept lifting weights and I kept eating all those calories. Like, I just want to see what's beneath the surface. I wanted to penetrate deeper and deeper, transcend to the next level, on and on and on. And suffering, I guess, could be the catalyst of that. But there was never a goal. For a lot of people, a lot of seekers, their goal is to eradicate suffering. Like, I'm asking, why did you get on a spiritual path? I was suffering. But for me, it was just, I just wanted to, quote unquote, like we talked about in the first episode, I wanted to know first I wanted to know what the fuck this Frankian thing is. And after I see through that, this Frankian thing is just a projection, just a hallucination. And what the fuck is doing hallucinating? What the fuck is reality? So that was always my quote unquote goal. And then as a byproduct of understanding reality, or understanding direct experience, of understanding consciousness, my suffering has been eradicated by 99.9%. So by not focusing on suffering, I actually eradicated suffering.
See, it's interesting. I both totally relate and kind of differ in that. For me, it's like in feeling the suffering of the world, it's like it doesn't hurt anymore. It's like, I know that's a lesson. I know the greatest lesson in the world is contained within that, and that to seek these experiences out, to seek out the cry of the world, to hear it and heed it and run toward it. I know, even in a perhaps in a selfish way, in terms of self realizing itself, all of us being the self, not me, I'm myself in a selfish way, but the self as all things, in terms of, like Krishna consciousness, or Christ consciousness, the self in all things, to run toward that pain of the self, to realize that's me crying out, that's my own soul crying out, that's consciousness, which is the whole gambit, the whole thing in pain. And it's telling me something. Like, pain is a lesson. Like when you get bit by a mosquito and you itch, it's your body telling you to slap it, otherwise it'll just keep drinking your blood. And that's what our pain is. That's what the pain and suffering in our world is. It's telling us something very, very precisely. There's a message for us. And I think when we make it all internalized about, oh, you know, the kingdom of God lies within, or you got to look inward, I think we forget that to look inward is to look outward, is to look at the people around us.
And to look inward requires the basic needs being met of people, which is very big. It's an external thing to have clean air, clean water, clean food, shelter, electricity, education, healthcare. Those are external things that then enable you to inquire with the question, who am I? What is reality? And that's a really important point. It synthesizes science and spirituality. It synthesizes consciousness and physicalism, which is ultimately what we need to do. And to tie in what you guys have been talking about a little bit is that if you come from a place of like learning that you can take a breath, like 1, 2, 3, count to 3, take a breath before you react to things, that's fantastic. And that can be really helpful. And you can go and share that with the world and help alleviate suffering that way, totally. But the way that, in a sense, awakening plays into this is that if you go, quote, all the way in this process of emptying out all of your conditioning and all of your separation and all of your ego, and rather than this being something that is trying to still extract validation or extract worthiness from other people, instead, this comes as just literally the sun itself. Enlightenment comes as just the sun itself radiating perpetually onto all. And so you're not actually ever coming from a place of needing to get something from other people. So it's almost like the level of purity of service and the level of purity of compassion increases in proportion to how awakened you are.
Well, it's also, you know, the ability to which you can experience truth, awakening, love, all of these things, I think is directly proportional to what others can. I mean, Martin Luther King said something like, for some strange reason, you know, I'm not happy until you're happy. What affects you affects me. And I think really that's maybe the fundamental disconnect of our entire society. And, you know, you use that word extraction multiple times. And I mean, I think that's kind of the core a value system that we're trapped under, which, you know, it's like an addiction. It's like Frank can talk about this, about, you know, meditation kind of breaking you out of an addictive mentality and an addictive narrative or an identification with who you think you are. And I think that's really what we're trapped in this world. It's a corrosive and extractive belief system, a narrative of who we think we are that goes all the way down to the deepest levels of what most people think a human being is, or reality is. That a human being is selfish, is greedy, that, you know, we're competitive, that the purpose of life is to fuck other people over and get what you can and say fuck the rest. And it's capitalism. It's a system. It's an economic system that is a zealous, economic, idolatrous, you know, false belief system that we have implanted and spread over the entire earth, and have said, you know, this ultimate separateness that spreads and blankets everything, this sort of antichrist, this nebulous thing that doesn't really exist, that we substantiate through money and through trade and through these economic systems, which are really the most corrosive, you know, religious doctrine in the world. You know, these forces are absolutely and directly keeping all of us from ascending, you know, to a high degree. And I see this system really penetrate much deeper, even into spiritual people. Spiritual people still see themselves still see the system itself, the way that our society runs, the way that our consumer cycle is driven on endless growth and endless consumption and endless, you know, self-interest, maximizing self-interest. I see a lot of spiritual people, you know, trapped in this because it's the deepest unquestioned narrative, the deepest identification and addiction. And I think it even gets me to the point where I have really distanced myself from the conscious movement in a lot of ways, because it's so pervasive, this self-interest, this kind of narcissistic spirituality that is all about me, all about how I can ascend. And then, oh, these people who aren't ascending, they're sheep. They're sheep, you know, they don't understand anything. They don't know what's, you know, happening. They're going to fall behind and I'm going to ascend. And this is a toxicity in our spiritual movement, and it needs to be addressed, because we can't individually ascend. It's self-interest in a way, the self-interest for all of us to get to the point where we change these systems, we change these identifications, this bad dream of humanity, of human history, and get to a point where everyone's needs are met, so that the purpose of society itself, the design of society, is to work people up that ladder of meeting their needs, to get them to the point where they can really figure out what the fuck is going on and ascend.
I think enlightenment is the most selfish pursuit in existence. It's all about the self. It's all about the self to the point where at the end, you flip yourself inside out. So it's all about the self up to the point where you realize there's absolutely no self. And then after you realize there's absolutely no self, whatever action that you do is not going to be your decision anymore. So some people wake up and then they don't do shit. Some people wake up, they play video games. Some people wake up, they do things for the environment. They help people wake up. They become teachers. Some people wake up and then they become a CEO. But after you wake up, anything that you do will be an act of compassion. Because it would automatically be an act not for the self, because there is no self. So after you wake up, you don't. It's like we talked about earlier on the other episode. It's like you don't have agency anymore. So it's like it's not you deciding to do this.
I don't have agency. I'm not free. I wake up and just do what I'm supposed to do, and that's it.
yeah, but it's not like you're not free either, because it's neither free nor not free, right? It's just
exactly. Yeah. No, I really. It's a beautiful thing. It's the most beautiful thing in the world.
Yeah.
I was trying to explain this to somebody the other day. It's like she was like, "Oh, the world is so crazy. I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what's going to happen." It's like, well, you just accept that no matter what happens is going to happen, and really seek to understand, like, okay, the world is hurting and crazy, and I have a role to play. This earth evolved me for a purpose and a part to play in here, and it didn't evolve me to just participate in its destruction. It evolved me to facilitate growth and sharing and the increase of biodiversity, not the radical reduction. So it's like finding that sense of purpose. Why are you in this world? How are you participating in this struggle, this adventure of collective awakening, of getting there together, of raising us all up, because currently the whole social system is dragging us all down. But it's like, I really feel like when you find that purpose, that way, that when you realize that love is all there is, and you've got to spread it like wildfire, you've got to spread that shit like crazy, or you just realize like that climate change is real, the earth is dying, and none of us can ascend. And you as a spiritual person might think, oh, I'm going to fly away, I'm going to go to the astral realm. Fuck you. That's not, there's nothing.
That's not spirituality, bro. Spirituality is not about ascending to some higher realm of consciousness. So, like I said, spirituality is realizing form and emptiness are identical, and the form part of it is Well, form you can look at it a very pragmatic way, saying like this object has no here in existence. I can penetrate it. It's holographic, and it's only just
particles that are made up of quanta that are spinning around, and at the core, nothing.
Yeah, there's not even quanta. It's just nothing here. Okay, but then you can also say this is also form. This is also something. And the emptiness part of it and the compassion, the compassion part of it and the form part of it is identical. As that emptiness manifests itself in not just the manifestation of objects, but also in like things like compassion. That's why compassion is an emphasis in a lot of traditions. And I also think the reason why compassion is such an emphasis on a lot of traditions is because after awakening, if you don't practice compassion, it's not a guarantee that you become compassionate, even though like every action you do it won't be for the self anymore, but that still doesn't mean that you're going to do things for other people. Do you know the difference?
Well, yeah, I think it's like you can have this kind of higher understanding of what's going on in the universe on this, very kind of cold and detached, disconnected, particulate way, where you're just sort of passively observing things. But we exist in different layers and levels. There are levels to who we are as
exactly.
Say you're a husband, a father, a friend, whatever, these are all conditional relations, but it's like our ultimate conditional relation is to the earth, is to this planet, and to the species that we are, to this world that we are all a part of, to the biosphere, to our ecosystem, not our ego system that is, this totally abstract, formless, it's this anti-enlightenment to exist in this very weird, we live in an abstraction. A lot of people, anybody who says spirituality isn't real, or, that I'm a materialist or whatever, we live in this really weird world where we live in a world of abstract values. We can say it's a scientific thing that, economics dictates, that this is the way that things have to be, but that's totally just a nonsense tradition. I mean, it's not real. It's not based on anything real. It's based on a belief system that we have projected onto the world around us. And I think those people who maybe they have hit enlightenment, maybe they've crowned to the top of the jhanas, and they've experienced the essential final truth of everything, but they're still acting selfishly, or they're still laying around. They're not in their purpose. The road is not over, my friend. The road is long from over. And I think for me, I don't know. I can sit at the table with Frank and with Atlas, who I think have gone a lot further in their introspection than I have. But I'm here. We're at the same sort of place. We're walking hand in hand through this beautiful field of flowers. Where, what's the Rumi quote? Oh no, there's a field, but between good and evil, there's a field. I'll meet you there. That's a beautiful little quote. But yeah, we're here, and anything that I learned through feeling the feelings of someone else. Not through studying my own brain. I mean, I'm obsessed with my own thoughts. And for years, I was obsessed with studying my own thoughts. And it just killed me. It just fried me. It was a feedback loop of nonsense. And that's what we are caught in collectively. And as soon as I pointed that very, very sensitive microphone that was my consciousness, my awareness, away from my own innards and pointed it at other people, it was like everything got so much more beautiful. And not just like nice and good. I mean, I really started to learn and grow and tune into like, what is my purpose? What is my purpose in relation to other people, not just to myself, not just to my own bliss. And through doing that, I found my bliss, which is to communicate this stuff to other people, which is so beautiful to watch Frank transform. And his glow up is the ultimate glow up, the Frank Yang glow up, the body, the mind and heart transformation, that you're at this point where you just want to share this information. Like no other spiritual guru, or, you're not a guru. Like I met a lot of spiritual cunts, as you like to call them.
That's what exactly I was going to mention.
And they're not about they're really not humble at all.
It's called spiritual materialism. It's like you said earlier, it's hijacking spirituality for selfish purposes, which makes spirituality really, after 99% of the people who are into spirituality fall under the umbrella. I would say before you completely transcend the self, any spiritual practice do is going to be in a larger or lesser degree about the self. So that makes spirituality no different from.
And just to play on what Frank was just saying there, even though you may, because this has happened to me and many other people before, even though you may think that you're serving other people because you have this like external facing mentality, which is really important. Like what we're describing, this is what you've been saying, so important with meeting basic needs and stuff. But one place that I would agree with Frank, where there's like a tremendous amount of people that fall into this category right now, is people that are faced outward in serving people, but are focused, even if it's subconsciously, they're focused on how their image is going to look in the social sphere, for how then they get their clout and how they get more relations and how they get more women, dopamine, this type of thing. Because then they can have more of a, it's called the extended phenotype in Richard Dawkins's language. And so they work on this, on their genetic success based on social clout and how their individuation is being portrayed in the sphere. I've seen that so much. And actually, as Frank just indicated, that so much of what people are hijacking spirituality as are falling into that similar category. And the only thing that holds, the only differentiating factor is not only passion for truth, but with that is also passion for purification, is passion for emptying yourself out of all of your conditioning and ego and bullshit, so that you can actually serve people purely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so you have to go inward. You have to continuously go inward in order for what you do when you go outward to actually be in pure service.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that going after a while, after you completely go inward, you flip yourself inside out. That's why I said enlightenment is completely selfish, and then until you become completely selfless. And then up to that point, everything you do is going to be for the self, because you can't do nothing except for the self when you haven't realized that there is no self, right? So whether that's spirituality or doing things for the community or for the environment or playing basketball or being a CEO, but that still doesn't mean that you can't service others. You can't serve other people at that stage. You still can. It's important to serve other people at that stage still. It's better to be a selfish altruistic
yes.
than be a selfish murderer, right?
Yes.
And
Well, it's better to be a selfish altruistic cunt than a selfless murderer.
exactly.
You know?
Yeah, but after you become completely selfless, it's the chance of you murdering a person would be almost zero. Will be, unless it's like a self-defense. So that's what I'm saying. It's like after you flip yourself inside out, there's no more distinction between inside and outside. That the thing about inside and outside is that in non-duality there is no such distinctions. You wouldn't think of doing anything for the self, nor will you think of anything to do anything for the other people. You just do things, and whatever you do would be pure, regardless, even if it's just playing a video game. But the tricky part is like after that realization, you don't know what you're gonna do.
Yeah, I think that's the really tricky thing about the
That's the
paradigm
really
we're
tricky
in.
thing about enlightenment. It's like you don't know what you're gonna do afterwards.
This is the place where
and that's
But
Go ahead.
that's
you
where
would-
you could say that a lot of the organizations that gather people together that have awakened and to work on a collective objective, like igniting global awakening, like what we're doing with Vincent Massaro and the No Limit Society, that seems to be one of the best ways to sort of to take what you said is this: we don't know what will happen to we can actually create like these landing strips for people as they awaken, and then we can help them integrate their awakening. We can help with turning people in more and more towards pure service as they've went in until that duality is transcended. But that's great, because it is very important to have a community and have home as you go through this process of even physically, when you become aware of the oneness of the planet. That in itself is mind-blowing when you begin understanding that your life is interdependent on trees and phytoplankton photosynthesizing oxygen for you. Because when you take that truth to people that don't understand that oneness aspect to reality, they can sometimes feel contracted because they don't necessarily feel that. It's almost like you can start getting a little bit of porosity of the self begins feeling some oneness porosity. They begin feeling perforated, almost based on physicalism to start. A lot of the time, they start feeling oneness more in a physicalism sense on a planetary level, at least to start.
Yeah, it's like they're on Molly or something, you know? They're not really tuned in and connected to really, it's like connecting to our sense of ourself beyond individualism. And I think that's kind of been the prevailing view is in the spiritual community is like, okay, we need to purify the individual and then collective change will come out as a result of the individual changing. And that's sort of where I've grown to really differ. I mean, maybe it's because I'm at a point in myself where I feel like I don't know, maybe I'm qualified to reckon with reality, to reckon with this crazy world from a spiritual perspective. And you know, like when you pulled up that page on class consciousness, Karl Marx came up. And I think a lot of people, I feel like asserting this because a lot of people have become identified with these belief systems, you know, and that's the way that they perceive, you know, the struggle of the system is through this dogma of someone else's purview. And I think Karl Marx is
that's true. You're very right.
Capitalism, but people, and I don't know. I'm mostly these days am in these circles of radicals and of activists and of people who are systems thinkers or economists or political people.
Ideologies ideologies are pathologized everywhere in culture, everywhere, creating lots of separation. Lots of separation.
Well, people try to pinpoint me to an ideology, or when I talk the way that I do, they say, "Oh, you're a communist," or "Oh, you're a socialist," or "You're an anarchist." And it's what are you? What's your thing? And it's like, well, really, it's a spiritual perspective. It's like a common sense perspective that what we are doing is wrong and unsustainable and destructive. And for me, it's like it is a place. It does come from a place of intuition. I feel like that's a tricky thing to sort of suggest to people, because the Nazis felt intuitively right about what they were doing, or someone in the KKK who is motivated maybe by a love for his daughter because he has a wrongful belief about a wrongful racist belief that is, maybe he feels that he is intuitively in the right position and is not continually analyzing that in any sort of rigor, with rigor. There is no lens between, or latency between his feeling and his action. And I think it's very tricky to traverse these states and to go from like this, aloof spiritual perspective that often can disconnect people from their connection to systems and to politics and through the everyday reality of our collective shared humanity. And then there's the other side of that, where someone is so lost in the systems approach or in the ideology, or in they're only doing that they become, in their own way, just another reactive mechanism. Like a lot of Marxists I know are just totally reactive. They're a reaction to a reaction to a reaction. They're not really coming from an organic place of really questioning every single thought that comes to their head and everything in their world. And it's very hard to prescribe changes like that. But I think to sort of boil this an endless tangent that will only be broken up momentarily and added with another tangent, that we need to shift from that, change the person to change the world. I think the people who are changed on that personal level through the miracles of suffering and the grace of other people and the love that has helped them get there. Like, I am only alive right now because of love. I didn't believe my own life was worth saving. And, that's the only reason that I feel that the world is changeable, that climate catastrophe can be changed today and averted, because my own life, which I didn't believe in at all, was saved by love, by the love of other people. We need to shift to a point where the people at that place, stop preaching a doctrine of, oh, save yourself and then you can be like me or whatever. We need to work together to attack these systems, or grab these systems, catch the identifying mechanism of, the human persona, which is this, the ego system of capitalism, of trade and business and economics, the words that the politics that make our world go around. We need to take those back from these people who are just reactions of reactions of reactions, and work to intelligently program them to meet everyone's needs and get everyone to a better place. So it's a collective awakening. That's the title of this episode. That's really what I feel like is important to talk about in my heart, even though I love just diving into the beautiful poetry of reality, of spirituality. That's
okay, take an example. If you've ever seen mycorrhizal networks, how fungi works underground. Fungi works underground in a two-way resource exchange with 95% of plants. It's unbelievable how it works. And so here's the thing, is that it works in a decentralized way. Fungi works in a decentralized way. Class consciousness and having this everything based on capitalism and wealth, and having contracting perspectives. If we go through this, not having basic needs met, where I'm working 80 hours a week, I have no time to turn inward and understand metacognition whatsoever, what's going to happen is that your lens of perception is going to get contracted and contracted and contracted. The scripts are going to pathologize your life, and you're going to more and more be fed in the data streams that make you more and more of a slave to that specific class consciousness, that specific lens.
Whether you're successful or poor,
And yes. And the way to break out of that in many ways is these tiny little nudges that can be made for people. Of course, architectural systems, which we'll talk about in a moment, that biomimic mycorrhizal networks and fungi.
Yeah,
but these
talk dirty
talk dirty to me, exactly, because that's ultimately the big picture thing, is like transcending a lot of the existing centralized infrastructures that contract people's consciousness, and transcending that to decentralized, liberated architectures that enable people to pursue higher states of consciousness, in essence.
Pause.
Yes.
I just want to say that I love you both very much.
I love you both too, Atlas and Zach.
Love you guys.
Yeah, this is Atlas is our second conversation, and I love that. I love meeting someone and just meeting them at the heart level. The totality, this is humanity. It's not. This is our most efficient way of cogitating, is this weird evolution that we do, which isn't like create tools and throw things and use our thumbs. It's to like merge our consciousness with somebody else, and our brains grow in the process. So we're like this weird three-headed, wonderful three-headed weirdo right now, oscillating towards some great awakening or some great insight. So yeah, that was.
I have a little input of what you just said.
Yes, go ahead.
I think awakening is going beyond right and wrong, because right now there is still a duality in what you're saying, Zach. That this thing is right and then that thing is wrong, and I think that's where actually the conflict comes from. Is that a certain group of people thinking their idea is right and the other group thinking it's wrong? And for me, awakening is waking up out of both of these paradigms, out of the green paradigm, the environmental paradigm, and the capitalist paradigm. Because right now, those two paradigms are what's causing the conflicts. And each of those paradigms, they're thinking they're right.
Well, but if the yeah, I mean,
well isn't that just a belief system?
Isn't that what?
Isn't it just a belief system that hurting the planet is wrong?
Yes. So Frank, here's a decent way to put that. That might provide insight. So we're gonna transcend. This is a very good point. This is a very good point. There's one set of centralized archaic infrastructures that exist right now that promulgate separation. Then there's this new envisioned set of architectures that are more around decentralization, that biomimic fungal networks that are more about enabling. They're way older. This set is actually 1 billion years old up here. And so the 1 billion-year-old intelligence, like fungi, is what we're aiming to architect next. And so what we're saying is that is not so in the most non-dual perspective, we transcend this completely. In the dualistic concessionary perspective that we can hold simultaneously, we see that these biomimic fungal networks are by far where we need to build our civilization moving forward, to increase and accelerate planetary awakening. And so you can hold non-duality where you collapse this, and also duality at the same time where there's something to build towards that's better.
I read an interesting thing about power struggles the other day, that often in struggles of power where there's asymmetry, the force that's in power isn't even aware that there is an alternative, and I'm sure that the forces in power are acutely aware that there is an alternative, and they feel in their logic that these people are jealous of our success, or if they have their way, then our whole mechanism, which is to them right, because I don't believe that anyone out there is intentionally destroying the earth. They're just literally mentally ill in a cultural delusion. And I think that I don't know, engaging in like, is there a point, or is it better for the world to die or the world to live? Like, if an asteroid crashed into the earth tomorrow and blew it up, that wouldn't be immoral. That wouldn't be wrong or even inefficient. That would kind of be the will of the universe, And if humans destroy the earth, I suppose that's the will of the universe, but I don't believe that that's going to happen. It will happen.
I like your speech you did. I love your podcast, by the way. You should link his podcast to the video.
We'll put the link in the bio. Yeah.
The speech that you gave at the end was very motivating for me. I liked it. It gave me goosebumps.
What was?
How about how you've been really optimistic about climate change? The podcast you did with your friends about climate change. At the end, you gave this whole speech about how you're optimistic, even though the whole thing is fucked up. So I like that. Anyway, I just want to mention that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think I said it better in that speech than I could here. I mean, because it was really presented with like, okay, the earth is going to die if we don't continue doing this. My dear friend Alan, who's a brilliant environmentalist, who's a brilliant atheist, by the way, who I love very much, laid it out that like, this is what's happening. This is what's going to happen if we don't radically change. That all life on earth is essentially going as we know it, because there'll still be the microrhizomal fungi will still they'll inherit the earth, but we and complex life forms on down to anything about as complex as a chicken is going to be dunzo. So that's it. That and we could go down a deep rabbit hole of saying is one better than the other, but it's not like it's one belief system fighting another. It's one belief system fighting the inherent selflessness of life existing, growing, coexisting, coagulating, coming together, and intensifying. Cells forming and intensifying that are based off of some aloof process of archetypal generation of meaning, of purpose. The universe is not, even if it is an illusion, and it is, if it's a simulation, and it is. We watch movies and they give us meaning in our lives. And I think that's what our existence is in this world, that ultimately we are creating meaning on a deep level. We may be a simulation, but there is a viewer, there is a final observer, that the whole world in itself is watching itself. And I'm not sure if there are formless beings, with personalities and intelligences, like the Bhagavad Gita says, and the Vedas say that there are personalities guiding the universe on an archetypal sort of way. They're not just blind forces of science, of like the Fibonacci sequence, or mathematics guiding the universe. And I think that is a manifestation of a kind of God, a kind of higher order intelligence, and that's what all of reality is. But really, we exist, and life is precious. It's precious because it just fucking is. It doesn't need to be vindicated any more than that. And what I am talking about, and what I feel like advocating for, is not a shift from one belief system to another, but it's a shift away from the artificial narrative that we have implanted on reality. This is what reality is. This is what life is. This is what humanity is. This is what we got to do. We got to be successful. We got to convert every living thing into dead profit. It's shifting out of that. It's ending this nightmare and basically lapsing back into this collective. Not just collective awakening doesn't just mean every person individually achieves enlightenment and then they can play video games and be enlightened. It's a deeper level of evolution. It's a true evolution of our consciousness, to the point where we are raising up out of all of these wheels of reactivity and duality and all these narratives, fighting narratives, Marxism versus capitalism. It's an end to all of that, and it's erasing it and saying, okay, we're going to connect with our intuitive, true sense of who we are as collaborative, intuitive creatures that work together to solve problems. We're going to raise us up out of scarcity, which is manufactured. Truly, we manufacture scarcity. We grow enough food to feed 10 billion humans, and there's a human dies of starvation every 6 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Dead person, dead human life, pointless loss. That person could be Einstein. That person could drastically improve the quality of life for all of us. That all of our mindless distractions that keep us from actually pondering and connecting with and substantiating materially and spiritually what is going on, from achieving that.
Can I challenge you on that again?
Sure. That's why we're here, buddy.
Isn't
play ball.
Isn't the idea of escaping the ego into the collective universal consciousness just another idea?
Yeah, it's really actually just a scheme to make money. I just try
to
build my
brand. I'm not even going there. I'm saying that's just another
I'm riffing
idea.
on you. What'd you say again?
I'm saying the move from the egoistic mind to the universal mind consciousness. You're saying that's the meaning of existence, and I'm challenging you on that one. I'm saying that's just another idea.
Well, ultimately, yeah, whatever happens, and we are merely
wait.
We're on a train.
Wait.
Okay.
Wait, Frank, because now it's important to challenge what you just said. So is it not generally clear that this expression of infinity, this universe, has within it a cosmological phenomenon that appears like consciousness awakening to recognizing its nature?
I would say there like we talked about in the last episode, there is some kind of knowing, there's an experience going on for sure, but anything that is said about that experience, including that it's consciousness or that it's our duties, it's the meaning of life to return to that source, it becomes another belief after a while. I'm not doubting that there is something going on here,
Okay. Hold on. Another way to say that would be that if you or I, Marlow onward, if we undergo a process of, let's say, uniting with the undercurrent of existence, a very general product of that is to serve as well as we can other pieces of life, awakening to the very undercurrent of existence. So that seems to be, at least in this expression of infinity, what is happening. We're not talking about consciousness. We're not talking about, just more like there is what appears to be somebody that had a more contracted energy and that now has a much more infinite free energy. And that in essence, what is happening is these pieces of life are going from that to, does that not appear to be how this is architected?
It's an expression of efficiency. It's not just this is right and morally right or wrong. It's something that is essentially parasitic and addictive, that is driving humanity to look away from, I hesitate to say like its true potential or for what is, but it's a destructive, addictive force that will snuff out all of life on this earth, and the ability and potential for consciousness to continue to grow and expand and swell. And this earth itself took billions and billions of years to form. Life took billions of years to form. Intelligent life that can cogitate on the form that we can. Although I think animals can, dolphins can, dogs can. They have an awareness of themselves. Birds can look at themselves in the mirror. I mean, our views of what is conscious are very, very limited. I was reading in the Shiva tradition, the Shiva oracles, where they've actually predated the Hindu and the Vedic and the Buddhist. They're like the wellspring, this kind of secret seed, spiritual practice and tradition. They were saying that everything in existence is conscious, down to a rock. A rock may have a small amount of consciousness as compared to something like a human or a dolphin or whatever, but everything is conscious. Everything exists and is, I think, gravitating towards something greater, there is an evolution going on. It isn't just particles bumping into each other randomly, forming for a little while. I mean,
that's also part of the evolution.
We evolved to get to this moment, you, I, Atlas, we did. And I think it's not like we're switching a belief system for another belief system. It's just kind of shaking off the weight of an addiction, of a delusion, of an attachment, like you have an attachment to anything else, like people who are still stuck at their attachment as a man or a human or, any of these things that we attach ourselves to that keeps us from progressing. Even somebody's attachment to themselves as a guru, like, oh, I've figured it out. I've reached enlightenment. That's a narrative that's keeping somebody from achieving what? From just getting there, from realizing something deeper about reality or about themselves. And I think all of these things are just fundamentally keeping us from realizing that, alone and individually, individually and together. And I think that there is something that it's only a dream. It's never been seen or done before. Maybe it has thousands of years ago in human history that we lived in this perfect oneness, this perfect unity. And we were able to, think on greater levels than we are today. But we're getting to the point where we can actually connect our consciousness, not just like through the internet, not through some drilling some chip in our head, but by just being aware of each other's existence, being aware of our own thoughts, our own consciousness, and the consciousness of others. That's going to take us to a place we've never seen before, that you haven't seen before, that none of us has experienced before.
So right now I have a visualization of like three different, I don't want to say ideology, but three different ways of experience in the world. We have the capitalistic perspective, and then we have the environmental perspective, and then we have the quote unquote spiritual perspective. And to me, they're all codependent arising. They are co-creating each other. They need each other. And to me, they're all the same. And from the perspective of that space, which gives rise to all three systems, it's hard to comprehend this whole thing about evolution of I think, like you said, everything is evolving in a sense, but nothing is moving. So the two levels are operating simultaneously. It's like inevitably we're evolving. That's why I keep telling people we're evolving. We're we're going somewhere. But at the same time, the consciousness cannot evolve because consciousness doesn't have levels. So there's an evolution in levels of the mind and levels of thinking before you get to the non-dual state of consciousness. So that's what we're doing as a collective thing, is that we're changing our mind and belief system so that we can break out of it. So it's not like consciousness is evolving, because consciousness doesn't evolve. The universe is just the way it is. There's no levels to the thing. All levels still belongs to the dream state and to the mind. But you have to go through levels, and you have to perceive the level, understand that there is a level to the mind before you can deconstruct the mind and enter that state where there is no levels. So there is an evolution. At the same time, there isn't. Everything's happening, yet nothing's happening.
And that's the simultaneity, which is such an important word.
Yeah, I can definitely get down with that. That, time as we perceive it is totally a linear thing. We are witnessing this like, one frame, or we're witnessing it as successive frames. But when you're in the editor, you can go backward. Or
exactly. That's a good
from the true perspective, you can go in any direction. And I think a lot of people get stuck in a moralistic sort of judgment of, say, the capitalistic perspective or the individual perspective, when in reality it is an aspect of evolution that we have to say, okay, this wasn't just a total deviation for no reason. This was to learn a lesson. The reason we separate from one, or from 0 to 1 and then to 2 and a non, is basically to learn, like, okay, no,
we can go back together.
We want to get back to 0. I've been writing this crazy sci-fi fantasy novel about all of human history and consciousness. And of course, Frank Yang is a character, and he plays a shape-shifting Buddha going around telling people that everything they believe is an illusion. And then they're like, hey, my reality's not an illusion, it's real. And they try to kick his ass, and he's like a super strong shapeshifter. It's great. It's gonna break me. It's gonna break narrative fiction. The characters, it'll be a series of films someday. The characters basically get to the point where they all ascend. They defeat the dragon and they save the world, and and then they're like, okay, but this isn't it. They keep going, and eventually they go to the realm of the gods, of the archetypes that make all this happen, and they're these tiny little beings watching this war of the gods play out, where this errant god, this sort of Lucifer, this Satan, this ego, the individual, the ego is, it's a collective thought dream of a disordered state of the human ego that we have projected onto all of society and said, this is it. This is the thing, the truth. And that's capitalism. That's the, endlessly expanding growth, cancerous growth model of capitalism. But so it's like, basically this god, this force kills all of the other gods and radically reduces them down to 1. And from 1, 0. And that's the birth of the universe. So it's like, we basically went so astray in ourselves, in this capitalistic system, in this point where we've pushed our earth to the point where it's about to die. Our mother is on her deathbed, is rattling with a cough, and she has to shake us off to continue living. And I think that happened so we could learn that's not the way, that we don't do that again. And when we are learning this, it's a simulation that all of consciousness itself is learning through us. Whether we will, in a linear fashion, experience that, we probably won't, But that's why we're going through it, to create meaning. And I think you could say that's an arbitrary term, or that's just a belief system. That's my belief. I still have beliefs, Maybe I just haven't sat under a tree long enough, but I believe that. I believe because it's not like something that I read, that's true. It's like, this is the whole purpose of my existence. And I'm not free to pursue. I have to pursue
what would it be like if you did empty yourself of all beliefs? Just curious.
Fucking rad. I'd probably just be better at what I'm doing. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I think. That's what I think too. I think you'll be better at what you're doing. And
maybe I would just realize that the earth isn't worth saving, and I just play video games.
No, that is such a common. By the way, guess what? Guess what is creating that thought? The conditioning that doesn't want to dissolve.
No, it's a joke.
Yes.
It's a joke. I want to.
Frank,
honestly, people tell me that all the time because I'm my podcast, Moneyless Society. It's about all of this. It's about collective systems change. It's in its own way. It's a spirit. I consider it a spiritual work, because to do spiritual work, I have to wake down, in Frank's beautiful term, to understand the way that this system works that's keeping people from realizing that. And the central, core, fetishist, tokenistic belief system that keeps us there, this magical implement, this, parasitic adaptation, this technology that has convinced the human species to forego all its symbiotic relationships for this one thing that makes it so I don't need anyone, and that's money. People can't do that. That just breaks their brain to think that we could live without money, even though we did for the vast majority of human existence. People say, if we take that out of the way, or if we end society's problems, or if we meet everybody's needs, there'll be no point. There'll be no, why will we wake up in the morning? Why will we do anything? What will be the point of that? And I think that's the silliest thing in the entire world. That's the most privileged position imaginable. It's like, oh, we end suffering, as we'll always suffer. Life will always be a crazy, dangerous, insane adventure. I'm not afraid of that. I'm excited for it.
If we scrub this video back like 3 minutes or whatnot, where you just said that if you emptied out those last bits of conditioning and beliefs, you would be better at what.
Oh no, I was being 100% sarcastic when I flipped at that.
Yeah,
I know.
But okay. So now wait. Let's just stay with this for a moment. So what's holding you back then from emptying out those last bits of conditioning and beliefs that would make you better at being in pure service to exactly what you're blueprinted for and what you're already doing?
Well, it's the rigor and the discipline to go through it. It's not fear. It's time, and it's intention, and it's.
Okay, wait. What do you think? What do you think the rigor and discipline is to deconstruct that last bit of conditioning? What do you think that process is?
Well, it's spending a lot of time. It's like going to the gym and bulking up, like our guru Frank has. It's going through the process of the discipline of hitting those jhanas. I don't know. I generally do feel empty. It's interesting. Like a friend was asking me, like, what are you thinking about? What's on your mind? I asked a girl that the other day. I was like, what are you thinking about? She gave me a really specific thing. She said, what are you thinking about? I said, nothing at all. I can't conjure a thought. I mean, my mind is generating things, but I can't make it think for me. I don't know. It's interesting, like talking to people who have gone through a lot of this stuff. That I've taken ayahuasca, and I've just gone through so much profound suffering, so many dark nights of the soul. I'm sure there's conditioning left to undo. And I mean, I'm a white man, I grew up entitled and rich or fairly well off and all that. Rich by anybody in the world's standards, Most of the people in the world living on $2 a day. Yeah, I grew up rich. So there's tons to dismantle. There's always more to dismantle. There's always more to dig out of ourselves. And I encourage anyone and everyone. I encourage myself, and I need to do that. It's a path that I will take. It's an eventuality. It's not something I might do or I'm on the fence about. It's an adventure I will go on when I'm called to it. But right now, this is the fruition of the bhakti yoga, or is it bhakti yoga? It's devotional yoga. This yoga, this service, I've been holding this pose for a long time, and I'm about to get that kundalini bust, of making things change, because that's it. That's what I'm here to do. And I will always, strive to improve and grow and to dismantle, to get there better.
What was I going to say?
Basketball.
Yeah. So when everything is meaningless, that means everything is meaningful, right? You can have a duality between what's meaningless and what's meaningful. Reality is neither one nor the many.
You know what I've been saying is purposeful meaninglessness.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one.
Absurdity.
What about diversity and oneness is the mathematics of the infinite?
Well, that's a good one. The many and the one. There's neither one or the many, but both, they exist simultaneously.
Yes.
And the reason why I point out the whole thing about universal consciousness as being another belief is that's why you said earlier about how a lot of spiritual people, they're kind of trapped in that box, right? of just falling back into the absolute transcendence. And we were just talking about the same thing earlier on the previous podcast about how there are really 3 stages. First, you have the normal world, the world through the lens of the separate self, the ego world. And the second, you have the spiritual world, the world through the absolute transcendence, the world through the God mind, whatever. And all the mystical traditions, that's their peak point, is that unity, total unity. And then there's a third level, which is coming down from the absolute transcendence and uniting nirvana with samsara. That's a quote unquote actual world. And I tell people that if you want to experience the actual world, watch the Animal Planet or watch the Our Planet documentaries. Watch the interdependency of the organisms and the naturalness, the natural state. It's not just one or the many. It's not just God consciousness, or it's not just the animal, the ego. It's everything is just codependent arising through links of conditions and causes. And that to me feels more like the true nature of our state than say Kundalini explosions or like angels or gods or even fractal DMT trip or capitalism or even selfish pursuits and egoistic maniac depiction of human beings like Wolf of Wall Street. Neither of those are the natural state, but both of them are at the same time.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
just
about
watching strangers on a train, you know, that's beautiful to me. A friend of mine just said this. I got this beautiful thing on film. He was just like, that's the most amazing thing to me. That's the thing I'm going to miss the most when I'm dead. It's not my mom. It's not my lover. It's just random interactions with human beings. It's just being a human. To put one more, to say one more thing about me and what I'm doing, why I feel called to do this. It's not because it's moral. It's not because, I have an argument or because I surveyed one belief system against another. It's just because I don't have a choice. I do it because it is natural. It is my natural state to do this. And all my life has spent, going through this adventure. You're talking about those 3 stages, it's like the book that blew my mind was The Hero's Journey, or The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. That it was like, we're all on an adventure. We're all on this journey. And there's the ordinary world. And then there's the fantastical world, dreams and fairies and monsters and treasures. And that world exists. That world exists in your mind, and it exists in the world outside of that. If you step out of what you accept to be the truth of reality, you can find that world. But and most Hollywood movies are actually based on that structure. But where they get it wrong is that it ends with the character, getting that Kundalini bust. They get their own boon. But it ends when you bring the boon back to the ordinary world and you give it to them and you share it with them. And it becomes a shared experience. That's why you go crazy. That's why you go into the wilderness and take on the devil, which is you. All the gods, all the monsters are you. They're consciousness. They're the self. But you go through that stuff to find that sacred treasure, that life-giving water, to bring it back to the world. That's it. And that's beautiful to me. And it's an insane thing. It's not rational at all. It's rational in the way that a peregrine falcon stooping and flying 200 miles an hour down from the sky to grab a smaller bird and eat it. That's not a rational thing. It's instinct. It's great. It feels great. Do it. Dive in. If you can find that water of the heart, dive the fuck in and follow that passion until you're not moving anymore on your own volition. And your only choice is even choosing a piece of pizza. It's like, what do I want on that? Oh, I could say I have the choice to choose my toppings. I don't have a choice. I'm going to get the burrata, it's the only one.
The hero's journey seems to be one of the best ways to help people shift from the existing scripts into more sovereignty and freedom and actualization and planetary prosperity. So that's a great archetype. It's a critical one. And just to also touch on what we've been talking about regarding fungi and what Frank just mentioned a moment ago as well, where there does seem to be a pretty fascinating you're kind of birthed in as a person, and then you're like, okay, how do I transcend this? And then you merge with God, which you were the whole time.
Whole time.
And then after that, there's no distinction between what is mundane worldly stuff and what is the transcendent nirvanic stuff.
Right.
And then that meeting point is what the fungal networks are basically trying to say. And Yeah, and then that's really where I've gotten fucked in the last couple of like, especially like weeks, is that what they're telling us, which is it's a it's a more than 1 billion-year-old intelligence, which, by the way, we come from 650 million years ago. The animal split from fungal lineage. So animals are descendants of fungi. So when Frank talks about Animal Planet and the Earth and the natural state, it's all a dependent origination. It's all infinity fucking itself with endless amounts of webs of causes. It's beautiful. Like, one of the most important messages that I got from fungi about like 3 months ago or something like that was that it went something like this. It was like, eons, bitch. Eons, bitch. Eons, bitch. And what it was saying was that it took eons, bitch, for you to have the exact experiences, for you to have the exact movie that you're having right now. Eons, bitch. Endless, infinite, dependent webs for you to have this experience. And that melted the fuck out of me. And that's what we are. That's what we are. And so that's why when people talk about this centerless, non-dual, very decentralized, universalized cosmic octopus, as Frank says, where each of us are tentacles, that the there's no words. Yeah,
it's kind of like this. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like each of us is a tentacle, but at the same time, we're also the originator of all the tentacles. So, like when I hear sensations outside now, when I look at the clouds, or when I hear the cars driving by, or when I look at you guys, I'm experiencing everything as just webs, just connected, like physically connected to everything. So it does literally feels like every single sensation is like a tentacle of tentacle of tentacle, right? And this whole field is absolutely connected. There's just the body of the the cosmic octopus. But at the same time, this cosmic octopus, there is just a manifestation. There's just a sensation. There's no center point to this octopus. You know what I mean? So it's not like Frank the octopus having tentacles. It's that Frank here, this thing here is just part of it's just one tentacle, right? And there's no central tentacle because everything is because no tentacles can exist by itself, has an inherent existence apart from those relations.
Alan, can you look up it's called Indra's net. It's describing this exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's from Tibetan Buddhism, and it's
so good.
It's basically that there's a crystal lattice, a web of everything. And the Indra's jewels, Indra's pearls. Oh, it's so beautiful. That there's a web of life, that life is every single.
By the way, look at what it's a metaphor used to illustrate shunyata, emptiness, and then also dependent origination.
Essentially, and I hope I don't mess this up, because it's like the most beautiful metaphor for everything that I've ever heard, that there's a net, a web of, it's all connected at this point at all these, vertices, these points, and every point is connected to every other point.
But it's also connected to itself.
Every single point is connected to everything else. So every moment that has ever come to pass in this web of not just, all of our associations, our lives, our dreams, our, best moments, our worst moments, they're all tethered in this wonderful way that if you really look at it, and I was talking about this today with, the ways that filmmaking or bringing a camera out changes reality, that to look at each moment, you can see the light shine through the crystal beads. But to point a camera at somebody else and ask them their story, as if it is a story, in a way of showing other people their hero's journey, because people walk through this world, most of them, they don't think they have a story. They don't think that there's a trajectory of their lives. They just kind of think it's just random, that this happened, then this happened, and then this happened. Oh, and then that happened. But really, when you get people talking about it and you ask the right questions, you can really show somebody that,
I love
this moment that I thought was meaningless, or that I thought was the worst moment of my life. And this is the most consistent thing I realized in studying stories and in looking at my own story. And I've been obsessed with my own story, forever, and seeing that there's a story in this life, and I can't waste this life on the mundane moments. I have to leave the ordinary world, not stay here in it. That when you realize that the worst moments in your life, the most gutless catastrophes that busted everything open and ripped you apart and poured acid down into the most sensitive aspect of you, that moment is the moment that led you to awakening, to enlightenment, to a beautiful sunset, or to just a moment of calm when it was all over. And that's this moment we're in as a species, as a collective, that our earth is on fire and is flooding, and you've got billionaires flying around in space taking selfies while it's happening, and you got human beings digging in a garbage can for food while that's happening. The indignity of this all seems fucking insane if you don't see that there's a story to it, that there's an evolution going on, that all of this happens for a reason. And maybe that reason is just to bring things back to the heat death of the universe and the undoing of the Big Bang, or whatever the beginning moment is, that independent origination where nothingness became somethingness. I don't think that's true. I think that we are going through this so we can learn from it, so we can learn better. And so our consciousness, or consciousness altogether, I can't substantiate that to say that consciousness can evolve, but everything else evolves. Why can't everythingness evolve, or even nothingness? Can nothingness not learn? Can nothingness not grow? Everything else does. Nothing else does. We aren't learning. Nothing is changing. Everything is changing. I'm getting confused. I need to meditate more.
Wait, can you pull up that picture again? Thanks for the telling us about the intro. What's it called?
Indra's
The
net.
Indra's net. Yeah. There's one picture that I like.
Thank you for calling that up. It's such a good one.
That's one particular one that I really like. Can we see it again? There's one with just a net, but there's no notes. That one's really. There's one with that one. I think that one right there. Yeah, that one. No, that one. Not that one. The one to the left of that. That one is pretty good because it's just a net. There's no notes. Like there's no particles in between those connections.
Click it again.
Because they're
make it bigger.
It's really hard to. It's almost impossible to illustrate this. It's just so complex. But see how there's really no like. There's not even that. There's no like there's no like balls in between those nets in a sense, right? Some of the other pictures have like a big ball, but that's the thing you try to deconstruct. That there's no balls. There's just the relations. There's just the connections. Yeah.
Speaking of balls, no balls. There's only relations.
Yeah. There's no balls. But speaking of
balls, I hate this, but I have to pee. I was gonna say, Frank, if you want to read your basketball post. Speaking of balls.
I was gonna say something about time because you said something about how movies everything's existing simultaneously. Yeah, same thing with the like ultimately. I think
Marlow, go pee, bro.
Frank, do your basketball thing because you were hot to trot. You were hot about that. I'll be.
Yeah, we will. We'll do that.
Let's do that later.
At some point, we will. Yeah. We'll see you in a bit.
So what he said about the film, everything exists simultaneously. I think that links only exist on the relative level of spatial dimension of space and time as well, because ultimately there's no process. Ultimately, everything is spontaneous and simultaneously arising. Oh, we're pausing?
No, I just made your screen big.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that would lead to the basketball post because the thing about decentralization in basketball. Let me go pee. Let me go T2 then.
Okay, me 3. I'll keep people occupied for a moment. Love you guys. Thanks for tuning in, fam. Super appreciate you. And super appreciate your comments. Thank you. We'll hope to answer your questions that you have.
I am back, Brah.
Okay, Frank, you keep people occupied. We have an audience question that I feel like it would be good
Okay.
for you to answer as well.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go use the bathroom, and Marlo's back. So I'm gonna go use the bathroom quick. You guys chat. We'll get to this audience question. Maybe after I come back or whenever with the basketball stuff. Blah blah blah. Be right back.
I was just laughing as I was taking my leak, performing my human function, engaging in this nonsensical dualistic web of balls and balls. I was just laughing how you and Atlas were talking about. You were like, bro, you haven't awakened? Bro, you haven't died? Oh, bro, you gotta do it. You were like, like big brothers that were like, oh, dude, you've never drank before? Bro, you gotta drink. Dude, oh, you gotta have this. It's great. I just love how innocent and sincere and just exhilarated you are about, experiences like that. I just love your zeal. I'm just gonna give him 30 seconds here and just appreciate you, Frank, because you're one of my very favorite life forms, death forms, nothingness forms, formless emptinesses, because you have this insatiable zeal and curiosity that is like such a miraculous thing. And so many people just lack. They're not curious. They're not interested in their world. They don't want to know anything. They just want to, if anything, they want to dull it, like with alcohol,
Well, I think what I'm doing is kind of similar to what you're doing. It's just in a different way. Yeah. So whatever you said could be directed at yourself.
That's the whole point, right? We're directing it all at the self.
Yeah, because when you ask people what they do after realization, like we said, like different people do different things. You can play basketball, you can be a CEO, you can like be a porn star, you can be an environmentalist. I guess the point is afterwards is you just do what I think the program that you were running before is important, because whatever program that you're running before will probably most likely keep running itself in a more efficient way, because without the doer, without the agency in the center, it's like what we talked about earlier. Like when you hear a sound before awakening, before non-duality, it's you hearing the sound. There's a delay, right? There's you and the sound. There's a delay. There's a delay between all the sensations. There's a delay between the seer and the scene. But after you deconstruct the center point, there's just the scene. In hearing, there's just the hearing. In thinking, there's just the thinking. It's not like you can't think. It's not you have to be in the space of no thought. It's not like that. It's like when you think, it's not you thinking. It's thoughts just happen, and there's no thinker. There's only thoughts. And your thoughts actually become a lot more clean and efficient, and you have better thoughts when there is no thinker filtering the thoughts. Because the thinker is just an afterthought, it's a layover, right?
It's interesting. I don't know. I don't know if maybe I'm just ignorant, but that's really kind of how when you describe it, that's how it feels in my head. It feels.
Yeah, that's right.
It feels. Empty. It feels.
Frank.
It feels like
empty, but there's still thoughts.
I read that beautiful quote by Bruce Lee. Be like water. I think that's one of the most beautiful things anybody's ever said. I mean, I don't know that if it originated with him.
Lao Tzu.
Be like air. Be like air.
Well, just I loved his expansion of it, where he's just talking about like water can crash, water can drip. He said it. Well, yeah, it was Lao Tzu. All right, yeah, I gotta reread the Tao. Yeah. He said, be like water and fill the shape of whatever container you're in. And I think that's kind of one of the core principles of the insecurity of our, kind of Western materialistic, capitalistic, whatever society.
Wait. Before I lose this, I think this is a very important point. Frank, is the analogy to continue that the appearances that are happening on the screen, the appearances that happen on the screen is for no one. And then the screen and the appearances are the same, that there's no differentiation between them. And then the appearances are happening for no one.
Yeah. So basically, that's why I was telling him earlier about how like he's doing what he's doing, I'm doing what I'm doing, and then afterwards, after realization, the programming can continue, but without the doer, without the agent, it would be a lot quicker, but a lot more spontaneous and a lot more efficient at whatever it is that you're doing. Right. So in a sense, there's not even a container to contain the water.
What I was saying about that quote is that it's like our attitude, our deeply embedded individualistic attitude that is based in insecurity and scarcity and debt and war and all these false things, is to wherever you go, you assert yourself. You say, this is me. This is my place. You project outward what you think you are onto reality in this way that is so insecure that, you know, armies in the world right now are going into other countries like Cuba. They're threatening to do this to Cuba. They want to smash Cuba into the shape of what we think the United States thinks it's supposed to be, which is it, you know, instead of going into a room and feeling that room, not feeling a separation, you know, going into that room and just effortlessly being in that space. And I feel like that fluidity for me came from hitchhiking more than anything, of traveling around and realizing like, okay, I go from place to place. None of these people know who I am at all. They have no clue who I am. I become essentially this sort of reflection of the person that I'm talking to. Say I'm in a trucker's cab. He could kill me. I could kill him. It didn't happen in either form, but it's like you become that person in a way. And everywhere you go, there's this heightened sense of need, though, where there's not this latency of like you're two people at a party and you have to find something to say and you dig. It's just like, okay, my life depends on me being social. My life depends on, like, I don't have a place to sleep. I don't have a bed. I'm going to have to talk to people and be social. It's like there's this really powerful rawness and immediacy of intuition that's like, I need to socialize to find what I need. And that's life without money. That's life without, you know, any of the trappings or the fast passes or whatever of this world, the materialized forms that allow us to sort of transcend this natural state. That you need, that latency goes away quickly because you will die without it. You know, that latency of it's like fight or flight, but it's like socialize or die. That's it. That's be social, be together, realize togetherness, realize that no matter the person you're talking to, you need to connect with them. You need to, or you could die. And so it's like, no matter who they are, if they're a murderer, I've talked to murderers and I've loved them, you know, I've talked to sex offenders and loved them, you know, and realized all these people, all these bad people. I've talked to highly successful business people who have exploited the world and blah, 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 blah. I've talked to all kinds of different people. And it's like, there's this really interesting dependent position as a traveler, as somebody without money, without the means to, you know, be self-reliant, that I need these people. And that latency erodes every time you do that. Every interaction where you don't put that latency, that instantaneous judgment. Oh, do I like you? Do I give you my attention? No, you give it to everyone equally. But it's interesting that things optimize. You find the place where you're really, really supposed to be. When you listen not to what's going on around you, but you are that water. You are that water going into the room. So wherever you are, wherever you go, water is efficient. You know, it will find its channel. It will find its way back. Like electricity will find its way through a circuit in the most effective way. Fungus will do that too. They'll instinctively find their way, the most effective and intuitive pathway through life, to find the resources, to find what they need. And what we really need is that sense of connection. We, though, not just me. We, not just you, not just I, not just you, the listener. We, and all of this enlightenment, awakening, realization becomes so much easier when we shift out of that space, because there is no you, there is no me, there really isn't. They're nonsense. They make no sense. And if you know, you can go and sit under a tree. I'm not saying that in a dismissive way. I mean, you can meditate, you can go and look inside to the point where you realize you don't really exist. But it's actually quicker to just travel through the world and leave your, you know, narrative of who you are, and like in your actual organic interactions with people, realize who is the person that comes out. Oh, it's fluid. There is no like set me. There's no thing that I would say in this situation. I'm not a character in a book. There's just, you know, the most truthful thing to say. There's the most truthful way to be. And I think ridding
I always go back to
I was going to say ridding our society of this narrative that we have is the way to get back to that.
I think middle way, man. Middle way is the way. There is a you, but at the same time there isn't a you.
Frank, is there ever anything happening that's not the middle way? Isn't it auto middle weighing all the time? But yeah, anyway, keep going with what you were saying. It's auto middle weighing. But yeah, keep going. What were you saying? Self.
What is the middle way?
Neither asceticism nor indulgence in worldly pleasure.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Yeah, because I mean, it's not like we can't have money. It's not like we just gotta live a complete moneyless society.
Well, a moneyless society doesn't mean asceticism. It doesn't. It actually means getting past money means actually economizing our resources and intelligently distributing them in the most efficient way, not in a way where it's hoarded, so that everyone can have everything that they need and actually more. If that's what we want to talk about, I have the vision of that. It's not a sacrifice. It's not we need to live in the dirt again. It's we can live in an extremely high tech, efficient, powerful, beautiful, elegant society. Because that's our limitation. That's not what's giving us. That's not what's affording us. The powers that we have. That's what's limiting them. That's what's driving things to death. But the person.
Oh, that's funny because so isn't Bitcoin like a way to decentralize money?
Yes.
So is Bitcoin a good thing?
Yes. All cryptocurrency, all decentralization of centralized infrastructure in general is a good thing.
Yeah. So decentralization is the middle way.
Decentralization is dependent origination. It is fungi. Yeah.
Yeah, Atlas and I were talking about kind of Trojan horsing these spiritual principles into media, into movies, into books, into podcasts, and things like that. Like my podcast, Moneyless Society, is, although we have discussed spiritual, aspects. We like our recent episode, our most recent episode that's coming out tomorrow, is with two war veterans, and they're talking about imperialism and the military-industrial complex, and the ways that the financial system and the profit motive motivates wars. One of them said beautifully that this is a spiritual war that we're in. We're in a spiritual war, and every man, woman, child, and every other kind of living life form on this earth is, in the crossfire of that, has the gun to their head collectively.
It's this, yeah?
Yeah.
Awesome. So this is Zach's podcast on YouTube, everyone. The links will be in the bio below. Moneyless Society.
Click this one with the woman in red. I made this video too. You don't have to play the sound. Just play it just for a second. I shot all this. Oh, the audio's not playing. That's okay. Just a little tease. Yeah, it's a show that's not overtly spiritual, but I think it is, for me. This is the most prime.
Affecting you, it's affecting your children, it's affecting every single life on this planet.
It didn't start here in the Americas. It started long before the Americas.
Did we inherently know what we were doing? No matter how blatant the destruction that we are causing, we cling to archaic legislation and belief systems that perpetuate the destruction that we're causing.
That this is why we killed the world. For what? For money.
It's the system itself. I don't see it being enough on time without trying to really put some of those systems in check or just completely eradicate them. In essence, make them obsolete with better models at the same time.
It's not sustainable at all.
The grains in the hourglass are running out. Every single day, every second we talk, the end is looming closer.
What are the chances of us actually doing enough here?
I see zero reason to believe that the situation will change. We're at the hottest point ever. We are experiencing an extinction die-off rate that is 10,000 times faster than the natural path. It is simply a matter of how bad will it get.
And people don't realize we only have 2 years, you guys.
That I believe in one thing. I believe in life. I believe in nature. I believe in this earth itself. Maybe I will go to my death believing that, but I would rather go to my death believing that than accepting that this is it. Solutions exist This is, in its own dark and twisted way, is the greatest opportunity that we have ever had. And as we come together, I really truly believe we can do this. We can fix this. We can truly create a utopia out of this doomsday scenario.
Okay, I'm getting nervous, like I'm a kid in a school play or
All
something right
fixed.
now.
We are
bro.
individually and collectively faced with the single
That's
most
just like a
beautifully.
teaser
in the history.
for a longer episode where we really get into it about
Yeah,
climate
it's
change.
shot beautifully.
Change the course and
Yeah.
literally save the world.
Let's do it. Let's save the world. We have to. It's the intuitive path. It's the only path. Yeah, check us out. I think we have a really completely fresh perspective that it's not one ideology versus another. It's common sense. It's intuitive. It's for me, it's a very spiritual work. It's the most spiritual thing that we can do is to change our systems, because all of the, we look at the hippie movement or the conscious movement, or we look at all these, spiritual movements that have occurred in history. They just end up kind of changing. They change things on the surface level, but they don't really go for the deep root. And even in our society today, where you have spiritual people who have drank ayahuasca 30 times. I met this cat working on the Marianne Williamson campaign, and I won't name his name, but he was like, he mentioned ayahuasca. And I was like, wow, you've done this very special, beautiful thing. You drank from the fucking Holy Grail. I did that. And he was like, yeah, I've done it 30 times, maybe get on my level. And it was just like, maybe do it again with different people. Maybe check your ego next time. It's like, how can you drink ayahuasca 30 times and still just be an asshole, still be a total egotist? It's because those core beliefs are completely unquestioned. And every single aspect of our physical structural society reinforces individualism, disconnection, separation, and domination, which are not intuitive to who we are. But people think I'm crazy for talking like this. Maybe they do. I don't know. I don't really have a good sense of myself. I really don't. I just throw myself into these situations and I just do what I got to do. And hopefully people are resounding to it. I think it's a message that needs to come out, that we need to change, and we can. And it's not aestheticism. It's not retreating. It's going forward. How do you feel about that, Frank?
I don't really have any thoughts on that.
I had to ask emptiness to empty itself out.
Yeah, just do whatever makes you happy, bro. That's what I can say. If you're doing something that's not hurting people and makes you happy, passionate about, then that's great. That's the thing.
I think it's strange to me that more people don't feel called. And I'll do it on Instagram. I'll put out calls to action all the time. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing about this? Do you care about this? Or just saying, like, we have to do this. We have to. They is going to fix this. And our world, our way of life, our children's futures are all going to end if we don't. This is not a question. This is a scientific certainty. So it's strange to me that people don't feel that they don't gravitate to this. They don't answer the call. That we live in this period in our lives where the world is coming to an end in a way, or our world is.
The way I look at it is just that there's no reason why some people are into it, some others are not. It's just going back to causes and conditions, just the way it plays out right now. That happens that the Zach character cares about this more than some other characters, and some other characters care about their things. And I just don't have any, I guess, intellectual rationalization of why that is or why anything is.
I'm thinking in this moment, and I guess this isn't a new thought, but I'm thinking that, even if someone does meditate or take a psychedelic or go on a trip or something, that the media of our world, the cultural matrix of our world, not the deeper matrix of all duality, but just the belief system of our world, the media that we watch, the TV, the movies, all of this stuff is telling us a narrative about ourselves. And I think it kind of flushes out the intuitive, and it keeps things in this level where I think people they're just so disconnected from themselves. They're truly depersonalized and selfless in, again, this weird inverted way where they're not truly selfless in the way that they're realizing that the self is empty, that there is no real them, that they're, when they look in the mirror, they're looking at a bunch of particles and things like that. They're not realizing that on a deep level. They're just they haven't been introduced to or been thrust into the experience of life with enough vigor to really realize anything about themselves. So when you say you, and I do this a lot on Instagram, you have to take action or you're going to die and your children are going to die and everything around you is going to burn up. It's like people don't identify with those words, you. It's very strange. I'm just right now it's catching me with how strange that is, how weird it is that even in rampant self-interest, the self-interest of, okay, I want to live in a world, I want to have a planet to live on, I want this experience to go on. They're not activated by that.
I guess they're activated by their own ways.
But is it their ways, or is it a societal depersonalization, a conditioning, a belief system that's been inserted into their brain?
I mean, regardless, it's just that. I don't know. Is there really a difference?
Hard to say. I think there is, though. I definitely think there is a difference. There's levels of simulation, There's a simulation in a simulation. And there's a simulation in the simulation in the simulation in the simulation.
See, but I don't think the world is a simulation. I mean, the simulation is simulating itself. It's not, whatever level it is, it's simulating itself.
Yeah, I think it is kind of a
I mean?
It's a simulation. I think it's very real. It's very real. It lacks substance or whatever. It's our senses. Our senses kind of radically reducing all the particles and all the basically sense data down to something that we can make sense of. In that way, it's simulation. But I think it's very real.
Well, in that way, it's a simulation. But yeah, I guess it's, in a way, there's many different levels of simulation, all happening all the time. But then at the same time, every simulation is itself. Because at whatever level it is, it's still just itself doing its thing. So I guess you could say that it's simulating itself. At the same time, it's simulating other levels, and all levels are simulating each other. So it's not just like, oh, there's this world and there's a copy of it, and then we're trapped in this matrix and we have to get out of it. I think it's a lot more simple than that.
Well, yeah, there's a belief system, an economic system that is endlessly self-maximizing and seeks to leverage. Basically, it requires a slave class, a working class, wage slavery, and those people can't be intelligent enough that they kind of realize that exists. And I think self-actualized people. This is why the hippie movement or the student movement, the consciousness movement of the 60s and 70s was so dangerous that they literally shot people, was because, and why psychedelics are illegal. Why just now psilocybin is being legalized, because self-actualized people can't be controlled. They don't make good consumers. They don't make good workers. It's really hard. This has been one of the struggles of my life. It's been the greatest blessing of my life, that I'm a terrible worker for most people, because I can't just shut my brain off and box things and, put things and swipe things. And I'm not good at doing that and being a machine of productivity, because I'll see these fragments of myself in another person, and it blasts me out into some other thing. So there is a matrix, and the matrix is a belief system that's constantly reinforced and engendered by these sort of incentive structures, and monetary forms, and things in our world.
Sure, yeah. The matrix is the Maya. The Maya will do anything to sustain itself, and the Maya is just a collective ego. It's operating under the same mechanism as the ego, and anything that isn't part of the ego will automatically get demonetized. Sorry, what's that word? Demonized. Demonized, yeah.
Well,
so
no,
it's like
demonetized. No, really, anything that doesn't function in the ego, it doesn't make money. It doesn't make money to fix climate change. It doesn't make money to feed the homeless and to help people. It doesn't make money to give people free healthcare or to, it's like solar energy. I read this fucking MIT paper the other day that was like, yeah, solar energy, as it becomes cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, it will become unsustainable because we won't be able to continue making money off of it. It's like, that's why the world is the way that it is, because of this very strange demoniacal, materialization of ego, which is money.
Finding the perfection in the imperfection.
Well, I do see that. I'm actually in love with the whole journey. I'm in love with the fact that I'm alive at a point in history.
Okay. So it's obvious. It's obvious. There's simultaneity. It's all already perfect and ineffable and non-dual, and yet there's also the dualistic perfecting that's happening, where it's shifting from egoic, contracted architectures and consciousness, slave to money, towards decentralized, liberated freedom, individual actualization, prosperity. It's just all simultaneity. That's all it is. But the more that attention turns all the way inward and unites with its true nature, true essence, and focuses on the architectures that are next generation for the Gen Z and Generation Alpha for these next young people, that's exactly sort of the mentality that we want. That's quote going to make the most prosperity and abundance moving forward. One thing, yeah, I love it. One thing was there's a question that I want to answer in the chat quick, but right prior to that, I just want to say, because this is directly linked to the question as well. But is this what we were looking at earlier? Is it also related to the hyperbolic geometry? Where in the hyperbolic geometry, Frank, have you seen this before?
Yeah.
Wait, scroll down a little bit. Scroll down. Oh, I like. You can't see what I'm pointing at. Dang it.
But the style of geometry where it goes.
You click to see this gold one. This gold one.
Yes.
Circles. It's no. Other side, right by the grid. There we go. Click that. Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, that's really it. It's all intermeshed, it's all woven together.
Is that sort of similar, the hyperbolic geometry view, to the Indra's net? And is that resonant for you? And then you'll see this question, Frank. Is that resonant for you?
Yeah, also the picture you showed us earlier about the thousand-eyed, thousand-armed Buddha. It's also pretty good.
Avalokiteshvara. Yeah, I love her. Love it.
Oh,
all right.
Campbell talks about Avalokiteshvara.
Yes.
And here with 1,000 faces.
Yes. This fuck yes. Yes, exactly, bro. Exactly. Okay, here's the question. This is from Alexander Apostolov. Frank, how do you reconcile the computational leg between two codependent states in your consciousness that you perceive as to be codependent as everything is co-arising? What is the reconciliation mechanism? Frank, do you understand the question?
Like, what is the A giving rise to B? What is the middle stage that causes A to affect B? Is that the question?
I think what the question is around, like, if there is there a computational leg between codependent states in your consciousness?
No. Everything is arising simultaneously. All sensations, everything. That's why I said at the ultimate level, even dependent origination is just the concept. I mean, it's just another. It's just a tool for you to access the natural state, because in the natural state, I mean, there are links, sure, but the links are, it's not like you stop and think about how this causes that. During the contemplation, you can, but after a while, just things are just happening, right? You're just those webs, and even that webs it's not like there's a time. That's what we talked about earlier. It's not like there's a delay between the cause and effect on the ultimate level. Just like how Zach said, the film, when you edit a film, it's all laid out continuously. And is this simultaneously. So in a sense, in my experience, there's no lag at all between anything. Everything's happening. without
so-
delay.
So there's that,
I don't
and
know.
then this is the follow-up, is because if there was no computational lag, there would be no space for consciousness to exist, no leftover entropy from building higher order control structures on top of each other.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, on the relative level, there is sequences and cause and effect because there is time and space on the relative level, and yes, and then on the ultimate level, consciousness not like that's why I said the knowing the consciousness is not a space thing. It's not like consciousness space like, but it's not space. So that's why the thing we talked about earlier in the other episode, the knowing, the empty cognition of things, the empty cognizance, it's not really it's completely formless. Formlessness doesn't even have space, exactly. So even consciousness is deconstructed, right? So it's not like consciousness is this bubble where there is form and stuff, there's properties. So in a sense, from that strict level, there's no consciousness.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't know if that answers that question. So
I
once
think
again,
that it partly does. Yeah.
the connections are computational lack of the universe. That's the limit of how do you reconcile that? Well, what connections are the computational lag of the universe? That's the limit of how codependent everything can be. I don't understand that question.
I think what the indication is trying to talk about is the how codependent everything can be is dependent on the computational lag, and I don't know how the computational lag plays in. Like maybe the refresh rate is something that we could maybe explore talking about, where there's a greater refresh rate when you're more free, and if you're more contracted,
that's interesting.
Yeah, there's less of a refresh rate.
Exactly, that's the thing we were talking about earlier. How if there's no center, there's no agency, there's no doer. There's no delay. So there's no there's no lag in a sense. There's no computational lag in a state of enlightenment. So you don't reconcile. You can reconcile it before enlightenment. After enlightenment, you don't reconcile any delay because there is no lag.
It's interesting you said that, because it's like when somebody is in that state of extreme like poverty or deprivation or scarcity, where they're in that reactive state. They're just reacting to everything, and there's no latency or breath or frame or space between the thing that happens to them and their reaction, which is just it. It's in its own weird way. It's water. You know, they're like water. They're being like water in the most sort of inverted and toxic sense, that this depersonalized, mindless public that is kept that way through the system is, you know, there is no latency between their interaction and their reaction to the world.
I would say that okay, I guess there's three levels. First level is like there's even reaction itself. There's a process there, right? There's a process that's unfolding.
There's a biochemical and a survival mechanism. You know, there's a lot of layers and a lot of lenses to understand it. But people just react. Something happens to somebody, they react. They don't stop and think and question the system that brought them there, or the the codependent origination of all the things that happen to get them there. They just react. They are separated from, you know, the enmeshedness, connectedness of everything into that one thing.
That's very interesting, because I think the awakened state is kind of like that. It's not like, I wouldn't call it a reaction, but it just happened. It's like you don't stop and think about anything. You don't even try to observe thoughts. So in a sense, the awakened state and the complete non-awakened state is almost exactly alike, except it's completely different. And the analogy that I always use is watching TV versus being in the TV. Oh, you can watch the TV and react to the TV, but if you're in the movie, it's like the movie's just happening without. In a way, it's kind of like reacting to things because you don't think about anything, but things are still happening. So it's like it's the reaction that unfolds through, but it's harmonized.
One thing
it's
is
the
reacting
same
to another. It's the same thing. It's a wheel. It's a circle spinning.
Yeah, it's the same thing reacting to itself. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's not a cube. It's not a billiard ball being hit by the cue into something else. It's like perpetual motion.
Yeah, it's just is.
And I think that's kind of the state that we can all attain, you know, in every aspect of our life.
Okay. This is a great way to bring this in to what you were just sharing, which is that, Alexander shared this as well. The dimension in which your enlightenment exists is fundamentally a control structure in of itself that has a leg due to the principle of entangled complexity, which you can Google. Quantum mechanics is the leg. So one of the ways that you can potentially view the 7.5 billion people, or however many people feel like they might have a more contracted energy, and that maybe feel like they're slaves to the economic system.
They don't feel
anything. There's something there that is so also interesting, not only on a conscious, becoming conscious or becoming aware and gaining metacognition and then pursuing truth or enlightenment or whatever, but that even on a fundamental, even physics or energetic level, that there's a degree of contraction versus a degree of liberation, and we're figuring out. Yeah, and we're figuring out what's going on here as well in terms of the connectomics. When you look at EEG or fMRI, and you look at things that these biomarkers that show you if people are in more coherent states of consciousness or dissonant states of consciousness. So a dissonant state is very anxious, depressed, contracted. And so there's a lower quantum mechanical something that we have to figure out, like something that's going on there, versus when there's potentially, maybe it's potentiality is a big part of it. The potential, like in quantum mechanics, you see there's probabilities, right? And so you have greater probabilities and less contraction when the awakened states are present. And so then the biomarkers are around coherence. They're more around flow. They're less around anxiety. And so that spontaneous expression that Frank keeps talking about, it only comes from knowing mind nature, knowing mind essence. It only comes from Rigpa. It only comes from this natural state of seeing everything as the dependent origination, as the single one intelligence, endlessly, infinitely at play with itself. And that's what enables the expression to be pure service. But on a level of sort of getting there, the contracted energy goes on these things like hero's journeys when it sees that it can liberate itself to greater possibilities. Like there's a biometric shift inside of you that happens in your nervous system when you do shift into pursuing the hero's journey, or similarly when you become aware of yourself watching your thoughts, like the metacognition. So you basically get a central nervous system upgrade. Frank talks about this, like this contemplative AI that starts kicking in more and more and more over time. And so you gain more sovereignty and more awareness of the thought clouds appearing and disappearing. And then you get this, again, there's like this decontractive shift where now, like you were saying when Marlow started the show, that as soon as the train comes to a stop and is being delayed, all you do is go, and because you're not reactive, you're not impulsive, you're not contracted. And so there is a deep relationship with energy, and that we're discovering on a level of quantum mechanics that is still blowing people's minds, that everything is this no thing that is appearing as something at play with itself is just fucking insane. And so now there's the differentiation between contraction versus liberation.
Definitely.
Yeah,
that's definitely a thing.
I was just going to say the difference between, just to put all that into a very practical kind of sense, it's like the difference between anxiety and freedom is very thin. It's razor thin. I mean, it's really a perspective shift that it's like, okay, I lost my job, or I broke up with my girlfriend, my partner. It's this thing happened to me that set me off what I thought was my path. And the problem in that situation is life spreading out in probabilities that far outnumber the radical reduction of what we thought was life, was the trajectory, was my purpose. I was supposed to do this, blah, 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 all these rationalizing insanities that keep us from basically clinging to that one thing that isn't anymore. Oh, I was supposed to get to the train on time. And then we start to get anxious. Whereas it's like, okay, I'm not going where I thought I was supposed to go, or I have this road sprawled out in front of me. You know, I could go anywhere. I could do anything. That's the shift, is in seeing in that moment of latency. It's instead of, not to create this arbitrary duality of either you go here or you go here, but I think this exists on a biochemical level, that it's like when someone feels safe, when their needs are met, or when they are even in a place where their needs are not met, but their deeper sort of sense of self is sort of insulated in that kind of myelin sheath, that insulative protective layer that allows them to look at that expanse of the world out there above them, not as an oppression of possibilities that they can't fathom and control, but an adventure of endless possibilities. Anything could happen. And it's like, I think when you really step into that place, that adventure of anything can happen, the script, it starts to write itself. Like the AI, it starts to write itself. You start to see, this is scripted. This is too perfect. This is too good, you know? And your intentions, and, you know, to get into manifestation and all these things that have been totally co-opted to become like, you know, selfishness, and I want this car, and I want this material thing, and I want my success, and blah, 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 blah. When you set this pure intention, you know, reality itself around you changes to sort of meet that in a very freaky way, and synchronicities start to pop up. And I think those synchronicities on this adventure of life, you know, they're like the little clues, or they're like crystal gems, or whatever the structure of the video game that our existence is, that lets us know that we're going in the right direction, when things just seem meant to be. And it's impossible to say that to somebody who goes around with this belief system that life is oppressive, life is meaningless, you know, there's no God, there's no, you know, anything beyond what we can observe materially, even though quantum physics is you know, breaking the roof off of all of that reductive thought, that we've proven that there's no God, we have science. What the fuck are you talking about? Quantum physics has proven that everything we thought we knew, we don't. And that's liberating. That shouldn't scare you, because it breaks your narrow conception of what you thought was. We have only to discover how limitless we truly are.
No, I like the last thing you said about yeah, we just don't really know what the fuck is going on. That's freedom. Yeah, so yeah, just the difference, like you said, the difference between anxiety or the ego versus, you know, infinity or the state of God is just a contraction and expansion of sensations and energy. That's all there is to it. You know, it's the same sensation, it's the same particles, it's the same energy. When it's contracted, it's the ego. When it's expanded, it's you know, Christ consciousness or whatever. You know, yeah,
love.
And yeah,
God,
yeah, love,
or,
and love, God,
emergent.
reality.
You know, I'm sure there's a sanitized, you know, scientific way to put that.
Okay, if the nature really truly boils down to this is all one intelligence exploring infinite potential, the universe is a mechanism for us to explore some of it. And then as that, the 0 point energy, or the no thing, as it fluctuates in its expression, in its manifestation into something, into this play that this is, that there are individuated, contracted, egoic, separate energies that don't know their first link nature of knowledge. And then there's the other expression, which is completely decontracted, completely liberated, completely expansive, completely free, because it knows the first link, which is knowledge of mind essence. That's potentially what this whole, if that is this whole fabric of what this looks like, then it seems like the most important thing that can happen is to incrementally shift people, or even rapidly if possible, to shift people from contracted to expansive. And entheogens are one of the best, fastest ways to like open that up. But there's also there's things like microdosing on magic mushrooms for a single gram that can begin that opening process that are 100% safe.
Well, but also just meeting people's basic needs,
meeting people's basic
we
needs.
often try to seek
Yes.
this sort of medicinal cure-all
But
fix without realizing the fundamentals.
Yes, and and those are crystal clear given. I would go more into the realm right now of seeing who are the people on the planet that have the most wealth and influence, and or media, again, influence, or that run the largest corporations, or that are the presidents of countries, this type of stuff. And I would see if there are ways to shift their expression from the contracted separate to the expansive infinite free, and to see their fellow employees and their million followers as actually their brothers and sisters, because that creates a faster, I feel like, as you meet basic needs from the bottom up, you can also create the top-down consciousness expansion that then makes the architectures that already exist, like we're talking about the presidents that run countries across the world, or the Fortune 500 CEOs, or there's 2,200 billionaires. How many of them have ever tasted anything that's transpersonal? 100, 200?
Well, here's an interesting thing that Grimes, the wife of Elon Musk, is apparently very into DMT, and she's actually bought an island. This may be total hearsay. She's bought an island to basically grow or raise the toads that produce 5-MeO DMT. So what's very interesting to me, and I've seen this before. I've seen people take very powerful substances, ayahuasca included, which I used to think, if everybody just took ayahuasca or if everybody took acid, we would be beyond this. But it's like, for some reason, I'm reminded of a debate I had years ago with a friend of my mom's, who's this very deeply conservative, has this very abhorrent worldview, and I roundly beat him in this debate, or not beat him, but I got him to realize, like, okay, this is what you're actually advocating. This is the penultimate end of your worldview. Your system is the extraction of all resources into the hands of the smallest percentage of people, with the opportunity cost of a dead Earth. And those small people get into spaceships and they go to Earth and they flee and leave everyone else to die. And he was basically just like, "You're right. You're actually right." He said that. He said, "You're right." The unthinkable in a debate. And then we just buddied out and had fun. But what happened after that was he went back into his life, where he's surrounded by people who know him as a person who has these views. And then he goes back to his job, where he has to treat his employees in a certain way. He goes back to his social system, his politics, his party, his all of these things that continually reinforce him back into that belief that he has. So these people in this powerful position, if they had some awakening and began to shift things toward a certain degree, because I think that this is the problem with thinking that even an individual with massive power cannot basically override a system around them. So I don't know. I think we need to work on people at all levels, because it's not like rich, good, poor, bad. I think at the very highest, you study people's brains, they're rigid, contracted. They actually stop registering the emotions of people around them if they have enough power, wealth, and influence. And the same thing of people at the very bottom of wealth, that they are in that rigid, contracted state. So it's like, we need to work on people at all levels and realize we're all victims of culture. That the reason the way of the world isn't because of individualized moral failures or individualized moral salvation. It's because of this system, the social system and the incentive structure that has been placed into this world that makes it the way that it is. So basically, we are operating on an algorithm. We have an AI that is running our world, that is basically converting life into death, life into profit. And we need to change that. We need to change that system. And how we go about doing that is really the hardest question of all. We need to basically reprogram our collective AI and realign it with this natural principle, with natural law, essentially. And create, and we can use AI to do that. We don't need markets and things like that to manage resources. We have the technology to make that question of like, oh, who are you putting in charge of that? We have an AI that we survey the resources that exist in the earth. This is a resource-based economy. We survey the resources that exist on our earth. We have an artificial intelligence, an AI, or, you know, just even an algorithm or computer, a calculator that, you know, basically moderates and manages resource use, production, development, and, you know, essentially uses that to meet the needs, not the base needs, not the number of calories that are needed, the real spiritual, personal, humane, culinary, all the needs of humanity, to the point where we're all operating at our best level, to where we are all functioning at a place where we're all able to collectively work together in society to evolve things beyond fossil fuels, beyond these rustic, you know, antiquated 1,000-year-old financial systems and mercantile systems of trade and all this shit, and get us to the point where we're working to bring everybody there. There's no guillotine that's needed. There's no person that is beyond fixing and changing, but it requires a collective shift. It takes a village. It takes people being surrounded and conditioned and nurtured at all sides so that they don't lapse back into the old way of thinking, because it's so deep.
The thing about the whatever that guy asked me about
But
yeah, I love it. The Atlas.
Wait.
We have three people that are so weird here. You're like the straight man.
This is him, Frank. Yeah. Alexander mentioned he enjoyed our three convos. Yeah.
No, I wanted to answer his question. I didn't answer his question yet about
Go ahead.
He said something about quantum mechanics, and like I can Google it. See, I want to point out the distinction between the direct experience of realization and the mechanics of it. Because, like, yeah, this question, because it's kind of like asking when Usain Bolt is sprinting really fast, and he's in that zone where he's like sprinting like 9 seconds to cover 100 meters. He's not gonna think about the mechanics of that. He's not gonna look in his muscle and look at the cells and be like, what's making my speed happen? I think that's a really big confusion between the system of science and the direct experience of the manifestation of realizations. I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay. What one more time? The difference between the scientific approach versus the realization by direct experience is what?
Yes. I think it's one of the most.
Is what though? Is based on what?
It's one of the most misunderstood differences on the path.
No, I know, but what was your like core essence of how to differentiate when somebody is understanding the nature based on quantum mechanics or entanglement versus yeah.
Oh, well, it's like Usain Bolt sprinting, the direct experience of running 100-meter dash in 9 seconds versus reading a book about it or dissecting the muscles and look for the mechanics of what gives rise to the speed. That's the difference.
I see. Okay. What? Yeah. Oh, interesting.
I was just trying to point out that question is completely relevant to awakening.
That's so cool.
So because all his questions are based on the presumption that direct experience is the same as the mechanics of direct experience, but they're not. They're on two different levels. I just want to make that clear, because I can't answer that question because I don't know what gives rise to this. I have no fucking clue how this is infinite. Like, is it the brain or is it like quantum mechanics? Is it like what nerves gives rise to this? I don't care. It doesn't. It's not relevant to the direct experience.
It's like Frank, you said one of the first questions I asked you when we started filming, because Frank and I have been working on the Frank Yang the movie for quite some time now, and we were in the gym, and I had, I kind of had an idea. I'm an idealist. That's my stance. That's where I'm at. And I was like, Frank, what came first, mind or matter? And I was kind of expecting him to say, oh, of course, mind comes first, not matter. And then he said, neither. You basically said that the body is the brain, and I think that's a beautiful way of kind of putting it into the meatiest way of kind of understanding that the mind and matter, they need each other. They are creating each other. Like, say, the matrix, the material world is the computer, it's the hardware, the software is consciousness.
Like, how would you have a conscious experience without a world or like a reality for it to experience? And then also, how would you have a world or a reality without consciousness to experience? It's such a simple thing. Once you get the realization, it's so simple. It's like a child. It's like explain like I'm 5. It's so simple once you get that materialism or physicalism and consciousness or awareness are one thing. It's so simple once you get that.
So
they're
simple,
one
right?
thing. Yeah.
It's so simple. It's just like how understanding dependent origination just answers at least a lot of the question about why this happens. Why is this happening? How is this happening? It's the same with what you just said about how mind and matter are one, and you just stop analyzing what comes first. Does the brain or does the mind create consciousness? What is consciousness? Right? Like at some point, all that stuff just becomes like mental masturbation, and you just don't think about it.
Yeah, you just kind of intuitively makes sense. You just get it. Really, that's it.
You just like once you get it, you don't analyze it anymore because you don't analyze what you already understand.
The questioner dissolves. Yeah.
The questioner dissolves. Both the answer and the question dissolve.
Well, the questioner builds, but I think the curiosity remains, and there's only curiosity driving it.
Yeah,
that's
curiosity
that we are.
That drove it to know itself, and then it ends. And then it ends to know yourself completely, and then you dissolve your urge, the fire, and the seeking. It does. It's not the seeking ends, but then the knowing deepens. Yeah.
Right, exactly. The unfoldment deepens after you stop trying to figure it out with the mind. That's why I always say to God realize, you have to make God disappear. To realize the self, you make the self disappear. To realize anything, you absorb it, transcend it, you don't see it anymore.
Well, if you still talking about something, Carl Jung was talking about the ego. There's a really beautiful talk by Alan Watts where he talks about Carl Jung, and he actually knew Carl Jung, so he's like, oh yes, Carl was this way and he was this way, and he talks about he had this glimmer in his eye, this element of irreducible rascality, where he understood intuitively like that all humans are capable of all good and bad at the same time, that he didn't judge people like that. Oh, there was a really specific thing that he was saying that he said. Oh yeah, he said in dealing with a patient who is suffering from an ego, you can't diminish the ego, you can't break it up like you're breaking up a kidney stone or something. You have to basically encourage it and push it to the end. You have to push it to its enantiodromia. Enantiodromia was his term. The beautiful, big, beautiful 10-syllable word. The enantiodromia is when you push something so far in one direction, it goes all the way around to the other.
Totally.
And it's
totally.
Like,
that's exactly the point.
What we're doing with our system in this world. The enantiodromia of, expansion and extraction and selfishness, self-interest. We are doing this to the world where we need to really just come out the other side. We need to continue pushing this self-interest to the point where we realize self-interest is to fundamentally value the life of everyone around you. That you personally have a lot more to gain from everyone around you coming up with you and gaining with you. And that we can't even imagine our potential right now with this master-slave dynamic that is limiting the vast majority of human beings from even being able to fathom a conversation like this. Like if they were hearing this, it would just insult them. They'd just be like, "Oh, I feel stupid," or "I'm not smart enough for this." When everyone is smart enough to have these conversations, and that's why we're here, to sit here and just giggle and dig into the festoon, glimmering, glowing guts of what it is to be, and to ask these big, essential questions of like, just why, not why this or why that, why do I exist, or why do I? Why? Just taking these questions apart and figuring out really better questions to ask. We can't ask those questions and answer them until we basically wake down, all of us. We can't wake all the way up until we wake all the way down. We can't wake all the way down until we wake all the way up. So it's like this cycle. The geometry, that image really stuck with me, of those intertwining snakes, of the darkness kind of forming the light and the bad forming the good. And all of it kind of coming together, coalescing into this beautiful story, that the beginning of which is the seed of the end. And the end, there'd be no beginning without an end. And there's really no end. Endless sequels, endless spin-offs, endless new tales, new journeys, new adventures.
That's why I think the point you made about just exhausting the ego until it blows up, I think that's why I don't think I think nature will course correct itself. So like that's why if you push capital,
We are nature, and we are the course
That's what I'm saying.
correction.
Yeah, so that's why if you keep pushing capitalism to the end point, and it's going to deconstruct itself, and that's what's happening right now. All those movements that you're talking about, all this collective awakening that's happening, is because of that. And we are nature.
Yeah,
so
it's because it's adapt or die. I mean, and that's mutation and fuckery and mistakes are the keystones of evolution as we know it. I don't think we really understand evolution that well. I mean, I think natural selection is a silly thing. I mean, ecosystems evolve together. They evolve a role that is needed for the collective to exist within. So it's like, but evolution, that mutation, that thing that comes out that seems like a mistake, the thumb, the extra digit, there was an ape that evolved this extra digit, and did they make fun of him? Were they like, "What are you freak?" And he's like, "No, it makes me better." That we are at a point where we have evolved this tumorous growth of all this crazy excess and waste and destruction, and all of it can be used and channeled and recycled into something that we can't imagine.
Oh yeah, I gotta read my basketball post real quick before.
Yes,
I have to go.
Let's wrap. Yeah, we will wrap. Let me also just pull it up because I have it.
Because I think this relates to everything we're talking about. So it's like the last video. We could sum it up with just something that's more organized.
Okay, hold on.
I sent you the.
I know. I know. What I want to do is I want people to watch this first. Should they watch the video first, Frank, or do you want to read the post?
I don't really mind this, whatever. I mean, it's not really related.
Okay, well, it's somewhat related a little bit, but anyway. Okay, let's give them.
What am I watching?
Okay, yeah.
This is Frank Yang's dreamscape. It's beautiful.
I mean, I just kind of download. I mean, I edited it a little bit, so I'll just read the post real quick.
Okay, all right. So this is at least you have this for background. Okay, so now here's the post. You can read it from here if you want. Yeah.
I'll read it. Okay, so I turned on the TV to watch an NBA game for the first time in a decade. Today's NBA is like a video game that constantly updates itself with players that have no identities. Yeah, they're scoring more points than all-stars from the past generations. Teams that are jokes 20 years ago made it to the playoffs and deep into it, dominated by players that are anonymous unless you follow the game. All superstars are eliminated from the playoffs. Literally, I turned on the TV and watched the NBA finals. I was like, who the fuck are those players, man? Except after Stephen Curry, the anonymity enters the matrix, accumulating with Kobe's death and the pandemic. We're now inside an alternative universe. The game has been moved from big man dominating in the center to beyond the three-point line. Players are no longer confined to their specific roles, and all positions are shape-shifting. Superstar athletes like consciousness of the Buddha, superstar athletes of consciousness like Buddha, Christ, and gurus like MJs are a thing in the past. There are no more dynasties. Anyone can win a championship now. Likewise, thanks to the internet, enlightenment is now available to the common man. Some of the most infinite cons I know are not teachers or gurus, but normies with no followers or profile pics. Meditators are the athletes of consciousness. When you reach the endpoint, there's nothing but the universe flexing itself. Locke Kelly said that the first glimpse he had of 4K 360 awareness, which is the nature of mind, was when he was playing sports. If every NBA player attained non-duality, their game would be next level. Panoramic court vision by default, even when you're fucking. Athletic abilities and consciousness levels are evolving side by side. Sprinters are getting faster, bodybuilders are getting more juicy, and thoughts have bigger glutes. Slam dunk contests and sneakers are more psychedelics than ever. Different players have their own unique style to accomplish the same goal, which is putting the ball in the basket. Different practices from different traditions and different ideologies lead to different phenomenological and perceptual shifts at the end. And different flavors of realization and mystical experiences all lead to enlightenment, which has no levels. Why are you laughing?
It's just
I'm doing my PowerPoint presentation, bro.
I delight in every utterance, every letter, every intonation, the way that you jiggle when you do it. I just love you, man. I love your ability to pursue a metaphor until it's enantiodromia, to really do like we did in the laundromat, to really like find the infinite in the mundane. And that for me is like my ultimate spiritual practice is filmmaking, because it's like I was talking to Atlas before you jumped on. We thought you were having a monstrous poop. And I know how you poop, so we were not going to go into it now. But it's like getting a.
Oh yeah, you film my Mason pooping.
Yeah, it was good. You'll see it someday, world. But like for me, my meditation, my external meditation is looking at the world through the camera. and zooming into these little small details that are expressive of, you know, the immensity of everything. You know, that you find the infinite in anything if you zoom in close enough. And getting into the macro lens gets you even closer to that, where you see a pile of dust, and that's the entire galaxy. That's the entire universe that exists within you. That's for me is to look outward and to seek that in everything. And your ability to see that, to see infiniteness in basketball players running around a screen, which to me would just be completely absurd. I would have to really struggle to find that, you know? And I think that's so wonderful that we're specialized in that. We're specialized in this essentialized role of awareness becoming aware of itself, that we all perceive something that others wouldn't. That
I think filmmaking is very interesting because, like, when you look at as a director, as a person watching the film, it's kind of like unilocality. It's kind of like just consciousness, just floating around, right? Because when you know, it doesn't take sometimes it does, but it doesn't really take a perspective of, you know, one specific character so much as, like, you know, how the cut of the movie is kind of like a dream where you just kind of decentralize. You know, there's this. The camera is here, and I was there, and I was there, and I was there, and I was inside their mind. I was outside. There's a helicopter shot, and I was this and that. So it's kind of like the quote unquote witness. You know, the watching a movie is kind of participating in the God witness in a sense, and then you're doing it with the finite through the mundane and the infinite through the finite. Blah 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 blah.
For me, it's like it's you're creating something. You're creating a myth and a narrative out of reality that wasn't there before or was always there waiting to be realized. And it's like it's truly a quantum process that changes things. When you take out the camera, I was talking about this with a friend today, even if you don't release what you have shown, because the vast majority of the stuff I've shot, and Frank and I have fucking hours and hours and hours of awesome shit that we're going to release someday, you know, about how Frank Yang became this thing, how I became this thing through Frank Yang becoming this thing, etc. You know, it's like, even without viewing the movie, the sheer process of whipping the camera out and this focused form of observation, of gazing into reality intentfully, with an intent to find meaning in it, with an intent to find that you're going to find it even if it isn't there. And that's it. It's a quantum process that splits these particles into waves. And it changes the outcome of reality, not even just at what you focus on. When you bring the camera out, when you bring intention into your life, not just, it's beyond the metaphor of the camera. When you intentionally cultivate awareness, life outside of you, of your own individualized, localized perception, shifts and changes to meet you where you are, to find you and to connect with you. That's why we're having this conversation right now. It's a really strange thing that I messaged Frank Yang on Instagram 2 or 3 years ago, you know, and Frank connected Atlas and I. We started messaging each other on Instagram. We've had a very, you know, frail connection, as opposed to, you know, most people who talk, they meet each other at work. They talk to somebody, see them every day, but they don't have a conversation like this. They don't connect at this level. And that's what we're being limited from, that we're not all able to have these conversations at this deep heart level, that we're not able to puncture the veil of the mundane, that we live in this mundane world, but it's not. It's amazing. It's a miracle. It's incredible. It's unfathomable that we exist the way that we do. And I just want to see everyone get there. And until I think that's the bodhisattva, you know, that you could achieve enlightenment and die and pass on or emerge blissfully, but it's no fun if you can't bring others with you, is it? It's still fun. It's all fun.
Yeah. Amen. Beautiful. All right. Do you guys feel like we're good? Like that was a solid wrap?
Yeah, but the thing is, though, you don't zoom into the poop and then find the divine.
You got to know that it's there. But no,
it's already there. It's already, you know, just
Frank, you disconnected your mic.
Oh yeah, so okay. You don't really need to zoom in and then see the particles to find the divine and the infinite.
Well, but that's just that lens to get there, you know. That's the first step out the door. It's already there. It's already there. It's waiting for you to find it. It's already scripted. The adventure is written.
Sometimes people spend too much time on the zooming when they should be just.
You need a zoom and you need a wide angle, baby. You need to keep that shit wide.
Dude, you know this movie? Have you seen this movie called I forgot what it's called, but it's just like static shot of like super wide angle, and there's just characters moving there. And there's no centralized story.
Yeah,
There's no
pigeon sat on a
at all.
branch and reflected on eternity or something, or infinity. Amazing, beautiful.
It's on the endlessness, about endlessness. Have you seen it? About endlessness.
The movie's
same literally
director.
called.
He's got a trilogy. I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, that movie, man. It's the perfect analogy. It's the perfect representation of Nirvana and Samsara, infinite and the finite. It's the perfect analogy. I think it's a more perfect analogy of enlightenment than Matrix or Truman Show or anything like that. Watch this trailer. Watch this thing. This is so good. The entire movie is just like the framing and
So
anyways,
beautiful.
just watch the trailer. There's no centralized characters. There's no story. Just things happening. It's just completely absurd and random. And then you're just like this floating witness that's just like have no purpose. But it's super beautiful too, and everybody is chorus.
Yeah, it gets you to see the world that you overlook every day for its absurd beauty. Because the world is beautiful, it is beautiful how it is, without just saying we need to move beyond this ugly world as it is to the world that is good. That is a duality, but it's like, yeah, I mean, it's all beautiful.
You need
Really, it's
both.
all
You
beautiful.
need both.
Even the tragedy is beautiful, and it informs it in this non-linear way that it's like you can't have the beautiful without the unbeautiful, and they're completely interlinked. They're not one and the other. Ping pong ball bouncing back and forth between them. It is interlinked, and I think any back in that Carl Jung video
Oh, that's so good, bro. What?
Dude, you gotta no. You gotta watch the whole thing. You gotta watch the whole movie to really get the vibe.
We are, bro. That's for sure. Definitely gonna watch that. Holy shit.
Real quick,
That's what I mean. You don't need to zoom in because it's like right there.
What did you just say? I was
I'm gonna
switching.
let it go. It ain't worth it. Oh, I was saying that in that Carl Jung, Alan Watts video.
Did you just say that this is a representation of like the Jim Newman non-duality?
No, I said that movie is a really good representation of how of the enlightened state. Nirvana is samsara. That you don't get away from the suffering of life. You find bliss and beauty in the suffering of life. They exist simultaneously. So it's not like you zoom in anything or you go out into the outer world with them. In the midway stages, yes, you go into the God consciousness and DMT truth. But see, that movie is a better representation of non-duality than like movies like Matrix or like even Truman Show or like those trippy movies where you go
interesting.
That's what I mean. That's an example that I'm using.
But is it more efficient for collective awakening to prioritize the dissemination of movies like about endlessness that shows people the direct end goal that samsara and nirvana are one, or
I don't think so, maybe.
Yeah. So that's the question, because it does seem like, in a sense, when I watch a video of people showing me that I'm a sheep until I become aware of my thoughts, that is like, fuck, I need to become aware of my fucking thoughts. Yeah,
I know what you mean.
Yeah. So that's kind of interesting.
I kind of think that again, rooting it in my own experience, my own art as a movie maker, it's about the middle passage, and it's about making films that show people the beauty of the world as it is, the real true beauty, showing them something they've seen a million times in their life with magic in it, but also showing using that deeper allure, that deeper interest, that if we take this interest in our world, we see it's beautiful beyond our wildest dreams, and it was always there. It's not around the horizon. It's not like after the revolution life gets wonderful. It's already wonderful, and the process of getting there is wonderful. But yeah, I do think we really need to focus people's attention, their awareness. It's not just cultivating awareness of awareness itself, cultivating that awareness to the fact that this way of life is wrong, is diversive, is discursive, is destroying us, and that's what's destroying us. It's not reality itself eating itself in a random, raw, crazy way. There's a purpose to it, and it's a state of unconsciousness that we're living in. We live in an insane universe that says there is good and evil, and that there are good people and bad people. We need to transition to this non-dual sense of being, this sense of fluidity of who we are, that we aren't one individualized frame of a person. We're the whole movie. We're the person that changes through time, and that each person, whether they start out this point, this moment of awareness is gained as the villain or the hero or the baby, you know, we can all get back there together. We have that fluidity. We have that adaptability in us because that's essentially who we are. We're fluid. We are all the frames. We're not stopped on any one frame. We're not the beginning or the end. We're the whole movie. We're the whole, you know, bliss of the experience and the remembrance of that experience. Making movies is my psychedelic. It's my drug. It's my meditation. It's consistently what I glean these insights from, by just awareness, raw awareness, saying, okay, I'm staring at something and I don't see meaning in it. I need to find the meaning because it's there. If I can't see it, it's just because I'm not looking hard enough. I'm not using the right lens. Before.
Michael Kors.
I love Franck too. I'm a big Franck fan.
Oh, I love you, Michael.
Yes.
Kors, you are my hero.
Michael, the hero you see
Michael
in Frank
Kors
is the you could be.
Michael Kors, that guy from fitness. There's a channel called Michael Kors Fitness, and he was making recipes with his mom or something. And
hippie guy, yeah, baby. Woo!
I don't think that guy's hippie, man. He's like he plays the role of the sorority boy.
No, Michael's talking about Marlow.
Oh, okay. I thought he was talking about Michael Kors.
I think he's talking about Marlow.
Yeah, I'm no stranger to that word.
Yeah.
I don't fight it anymore. It's fine.
Bro, I gotta go eat lunch soon, man. I haven't eaten all day. It's 3 p.m.
Yeah, we've been going for 2 hours. We've been going for a long ass director's cut of a movie.
Franck, Alexander would be interested in chatting more, so maybe we can check on IG or whatnot.
I love you too, bro.
Yeah,
I'll
love
add
you, brother.
Alex.
Send me.
Y'all can link my you can link my Instagram here. Anybody who wants to talk,
yes, we will.
Yeah,
wrong or right or whatever wants to talk, I'll talk to anybody. I love people. This is why we do this, you know, for other people. It's part way to, you know, get into a crazy feedback loop with these two wonderful, you know, humans, these two wonderful experiences. But it's like it's about connecting with other people. So please reach out. Frank, we got to get together soon, baby. We got to make this movie. We got to go to Europe. We got to go to Asia. We got to go to Africa. We got to travel. We got to go to India. Come on, we got to do it. We will. We got to finish the Frank Yang journey.
Sure.
You got to train me. You got to yoke me up. You got to get me jacked. You got to teach me how to eat.
Yeah, we'll work out together.
Alice, I'm going to come. Are you going to be in LA? You're leaving for Europe soon, so
yes.
How much longer are you going to be in LA?
Yes, bro. Probably about another month or so, and this was very powerful. Like just really honing in on like basic needs was really strong. Also honing in on architectures and decentralization was really strong, and just our play together, us three, was really strong. And it was cool because we also went into the craziness of dependent origination, but we also went to explore a lot of mainstream stuff in this collective awakening episode. Marlow, this was a great first show together. Loved having you on, brother. It was really
anytime.
Cool.
Anytime.
Really cool.
I really live for this kind of conversation, this kind of talk. This is really, we were talking on the phone before about like when you find your thing, nothing else compares, you know? Nothing else feels as good as expressing yourself, you know, and doing your part to serve this higher purpose, this higher sense of love, of connection, of, you know, the infinite, and always here for that.
Yeah. Beautiful. And you guys can check out. Bro. Yeah.
I love you
for sure.
Oh, I love you so much.
Yeah, the passion's lit, bro. You got it rolling under you strong. And we have the links in the bio below again to Marlow's YouTube channel, also his Instagram. You can go and give him a follow, subscribe, watch his content. We'll have Frank's info down there as well. And maybe we will be producing more content soon. It's exciting. The simple analogies have been very powerful, I know. And so hopefully we can keep doing that. If the video brought you value, give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Leave us a comment below with your thoughts on the episode. We'd love to hear from you, and share the content with other people that you feel like this could profoundly influence and help. So that would be great.
Dude, do a thumbnail. This is a thumbnail for the video.
And that's all, fam. That's all. Thank you. Infinite love for you guys. Thank you.
Infinite
And yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Marlow. Thank you, Alice.
Love you guys.
Bye, everybody.
We will keep doing more. We'll keep doing